Balance work and rest. To balance work and rest is to honor the natural rhythm of human life, recognizing that productivity and recovery are not enemies but partners. Work is essential, for it provides structure, sustenance, progress, and a sense of purpose. Rest is equally essential, for it restores the body, clears the mind, and renews the spirit. To neglect either side is to invite imbalance. Too much work leads to exhaustion, burnout, and the erosion of joy, while too much rest leads to stagnation, loss of discipline, and wasted potential. True fulfillment lies in weaving the two together into a harmonious cycle, where each sustains and enriches the other. Work, when pursued with focus and dedication, allows a person to contribute, grow, and achieve. It creates meaning through effort and builds resilience by requiring discipline. But work taken to extremes becomes destructive. The modern world often glorifies overwork, treating busyness as a badge of honor, as though endless labor proves worth. Yet this illusion extracts a heavy cost. Health deteriorates, relationships weaken, creativity dries up, and the joy of living diminishes. Without rest, work becomes hollow, an endless grind with no space for renewal. Rest, on the other hand, is often misunderstood as laziness, but it is nothing of the kind. Rest is active nourishment for the body and mind. Sleep allows cells to repair and memory to consolidate. Quiet moments restore emotional balance and perspective. Leisure activities awaken creativity and refresh motivation. Even doing nothing for a while gives the nervous system space to reset, lowering stress and sharpening clarity. Rest is not a pause from life, it is part of life's very foundation, without which work itself collapses. Balancing the two requires wisdom, because life constantly tempts us to lean too far in one direction. Ambition and fear may push us toward endless work, while comfort and avoidance may lure us into too much rest. The balance lies in intentionality, choosing how to use time rather than letting it be stolen by compulsion or distraction. It means scheduling rest as seriously as work, and approaching both with respect. When you work, you give your full energy. When you rest, you allow yourself to truly disconnect, without guilt or anxiety. This separation allows both states to function at their best. Balance also means recognizing that different seasons of life demand different proportions. There will be times when work must intensify, during study, building a career, or caring for family. There will also be times when rest must take priority, recovering from illness, grieving loss, or simply recharging after sustained effort. Balance does not mean equal amounts at all times, it means knowing when to push and when to pause, when to give and when to replenish. This flexibility is what makes the balance sustainable. At a deeper level, balancing work and rest is an act of self-respect. It acknowledges that you are not a machine built only to produce, nor a creature meant only for comfort, but a human being with physical limits, emotional needs, and spiritual longings. To work without rest is to deny your humanity, to rest without work is to deny your potential. When you honor both, you honor the wholeness of who you are. This balance also enriches relationships and the quality of life itself. Overwork steals presence from family and friends, leaving loved ones with the shadow of your attention rather than its fullness. Oversleeping or endless idleness, in turn, drains opportunities to engage with others meaningfully. But when work and rest are in harmony, you bring your best self to your commitments, fully alive in both effort and leisure. Ultimately, balancing work and rest is about sustainability. It is about building a life where effort does not burn you out and rest does not weaken you, but where both alternate in rhythm, each making the other more meaningful. Work gives purpose to rest, and rest gives strength to work. Together, they create a cycle of growth, health, and joy. To live this rule is to live wisely, avoiding the extremes of endless striving or aimless drifting, and instead walking the steady path of a life that is productive, peaceful, and whole. Learn continuously. To learn continuously is to live in a state of perpetual growth, refusing to allow the mind to grow rigid or the spirit to become complacent. It is the recognition that knowledge is infinite, that the world is always larger than your current understanding, and that no matter how much you know, there will always be more to discover, refine, and integrate into your life. Learning continuously is not simply about accumulating information, it is about cultivating a mindset of curiosity, humility, and adaptability, one that sees every encounter and every moment as an opportunity to expand. This rule begins with humility. To commit to lifelong learning, you must accept that ignorance is not a flaw but a natural condition of being human. The person who believes they already know everything ceases to learn and quickly falls behind, trapped by the illusion of certainty. By contrast, those who acknowledge the limits of their knowledge keep themselves open to new ideas and perspectives. This humility is the soil in which true wisdom grows, because it prevents the ego from shutting the door on lessons that come from unexpected places. Continuous learning also requires curiosity, the desire to explore beyond the familiar and to ask questions that stretch the boundaries of your current understanding. Children embody this naturally, driven by wonder and an eagerness to know how things work. Adults often lose this spark, dulled by routine or weighed down by responsibilities, yet the essence of continuous learning lies in keeping that childlike curiosity alive. Curiosity leads you to seek, to experiment, to listen deeply, and to treat life as an unfolding mystery rather than a solved puzzle. Equally important is adaptability. The world is not static, it shifts at a pace that can feel overwhelming. Technologies emerge that transform industries, cultures evolve, and ideas that once seemed absolute dissolve under the light of new discoveries. Those who resist learning cling to outdated methods and grow brittle in the face of change. Those who embrace continuous learning, however, remain fluid and resilient, able to adjust course and thrive in unfamiliar terrain. Learning continuously equips you not only with new knowledge but also with the mental flexibility to navigate uncertainty. Continuous learning is not confined to classrooms or formal study. Books, courses, and mentors are valuable, but the most profound lessons often come from experience. Every failure carries a message, every conflict a teaching about human nature, every success a reminder of what works and why. To learn continuously is to live reflectively, asking after each experience, what can I take from this? How can it make me wiser, stronger, more effective, more compassionate? In this way, nothing is wasted, because everything is seen as part of the curriculum of life. Moreover, learning is not only about acquiring knowledge, it is also about transformation. True learning changes how you see the world and how you act within it. It reshapes habits, broadens perspective, and deepens understanding. Continuous learning makes you more capable, but it also makes you more empathetic, because the more you learn, the more you realize the vastness of human experience and the limits of your own view. It tempers arrogance and nurtures patience, as you come to see that each person you meet knows something you do not, and that wisdom is often hidden in unexpected voices. There is also a practical urgency to this rule. Skills erode if they are not sharpened, industries evolve beyond those who remain stagnant, and personal growth halts when learning ceases. To learn continuously is to future-proof yourself, to ensure that you remain relevant, resourceful, and capable in a world that never stops shifting. Whether in career, relationships, or personal fulfillment, continuous learning is the force that allows you to keep moving forward rather than being left behind. But beyond survival and success, there is joy in learning. To grasp an idea that once seemed beyond your reach, to solve a problem with knowledge you worked to acquire, to see connections that once escaped you, these moments bring a sense of vitality. Continuous learning fills life with freshness, because there is always something new to explore, a new depth to uncover, or a new skill to master. It keeps the spirit youthful, the mind sharp, and the days filled with meaning. Ultimately, to learn continuously is to honor the potential within you. It is to treat your mind and your character as living things that need nourishment, exercise, and challenge. It is to resist the temptation of comfort zones and to accept that growth often requires effort, patience, and even failure. A life without learning is a slow decline into stagnation, but a life of continuous learning is a life of renewal, where each season brings new growth and each day offers something to expand who you are. To live by this rule is to say, I will never be finished. I will always be a student. And as long as I breathe, I will continue to grow. Celebrate small wins. Celebrating small wins is not a trivial indulgence, it is an essential strategy for sustaining motivation, reinforcing progress, and building the resilience needed for long-term goals. Too often people postpone their sense of accomplishment until a distant finish line, graduation, promotion, debt-free living, a published book, believing that only the final result deserves recognition. But life is rarely a single grand moment, it is an accumulation of steps, each requiring effort and discipline. When you fail to acknowledge those steps, the journey feels endless, and fatigue sets in. Celebrating small wins creates micro-moments of reward that energize you to keep moving forward, even when the ultimate destination remains far away. Psychologically, small celebrations leverage the brain's reward system. Each acknowledgement of progress releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and motivation, which reinforces the behaviors that led to the win. This is why breaking a large goal into smaller milestones and celebrating each one works. It transforms an overwhelming challenge into a series of achievable targets, each providing a sense of competence and progress. Without these checkpoints, motivation can collapse under the weight of delayed gratification. The path to running a marathon, for example, feels daunting if you only celebrate on race day, but if you honor the first time you run a mile without stopping, the first time you hit 5 miles, or the week you trained consistently, your brain sees evidence of growth and rewards you for persistence. Celebrating small wins is also an antidote to the perfectionism and self-criticism that plague so many people. Perfectionists often dismiss incremental progress as not enough, focusing only on what remains undone. This mindset turns life into a relentless chase, draining joy from the process and breeding chronic dissatisfaction. By consciously recognizing small victories, completing a workout, sending a difficult email, resisting a bad habit for one day, you disrupt that pattern and teach your mind to see progress instead of deficit. This doesn't mean lowering standards, it means acknowledging that excellence is built step by step, and every step deserves respect. The celebration itself need not be extravagant, in fact, the simpler and more authentic, the better. A moment of gratitude, a quick note in a journal, sharing the achievement with a supportive friend, or allowing yourself a small reward like a favorite snack can be enough. The key is intentionality. Pause, notice what you accomplished, and let yourself feel good about it. Without this pause, your wins slip by unnoticed, and your brain receives no signal that the effort was worthwhile. This lack of acknowledgement can make you feel stuck, even when you are making steady progress. Recognizing small wins also builds confidence. Confidence is not born from grand gestures but from accumulated evidence that you can act, adapt, and improve. Every small success strengthens the identity of someone who follows through and moves forward. If you are trying to build a habit, for example, telling yourself, I am the kind of person who keeps promises to myself, becomes believable only through repeated proof. Each celebrated win becomes a brick in that identity, and over time, the structure becomes unshakable. This principle applies to teams and relationships as well. In collaborative settings, celebrating small wins maintains morale, strengthens bonds, and fosters a culture of progress rather than perfection. When a team only acknowledges major achievements, members feel invisible and unmotivated during long phases of hard work. But when leaders highlight incremental progress, finishing a draft, solving a tricky bug, reaching the first 100 customers, they create momentum and signal that effort is valued, not just outcomes. In relationships, appreciating small acts, like a partner doing the dishes without being asked or a friend checking in during a busy week, nurtures goodwill and connection. These acknowledgments accumulate, making people feel seen and appreciated. One common objection to celebrating small wins is the fear of complacency, that recognizing progress will make you stop striving. In reality, the opposite is true. Genuine celebration does not create laziness, it fuels persistence. Complacency comes from false arrival, the belief that you are done when you are not. Celebration, on the other hand, is about progress, not completion. It says, "I'm proud of how far I've come, and I'm ready for the next step." It keeps energy flowing instead of draining away in frustration. To make this practice consistent, build rituals around it. Keep a wins journal where you jot down at least 3 things you did well each day, no matter how small. Use visual progress trackers, habit charts, milestone boards, or even simple checklists that let you see your effort accumulating. Share wins with an accountability partner or a community that celebrates growth, not just results. These rituals create tangible evidence of momentum and protect you from the illusion that nothing is changing. Celebrating small wins is ultimately an act of self-respect and mindfulness. It shifts your focus from the gap, the distance between where you are and where you want to be, to the gain, the distance you have already covered. It reminds you that progress is a series of choices, and every time you act in alignment with your values or goals, you deserve acknowledgement. Life offers no guarantee that the grand finale will arrive exactly as planned, but it guarantees that today contains an opportunity to move closer. When you honor those moments, you make the process itself rewarding, and that is what sustains a meaningful life. Manage your time wisely. To manage your time wisely is to recognize that time is the most finite and irreplaceable resource you will ever possess. Money can be lost and earned again, possessions can be taken and replaced, even health can sometimes be repaired to a degree, but the hours that slip through your hands are gone forever. Every day you are given the same 24 hours as everyone else, and how you choose to spend them shapes the quality of your life more than any other factor. Managing time wisely is not simply about being efficient or busy, it is about aligning your use of time with what truly matters, ensuring that your days are not consumed by distractions but invested in the people, goals, and values that give your life meaning. To manage time well begins with the understanding that not all activities carry equal weight. Some tasks are urgent but trivial, others are quiet but deeply important. Many people drift through life reacting to demands, chasing after the urgent while neglecting the significant. They answer every message instantly, scroll endlessly, fill their days with tasks that make them feel busy but do little to move them forward. Managing time wisely requires the discipline to distinguish between activity and progress, between motion and direction. It is the ability to say no to what is meaningless so you can say yes to what is essential. Wisdom with time also involves foresight. You cannot control every event, but you can anticipate, plan, and prepare. The person who manages their time wisely looks ahead, considers the cost of choices, and places important commitments before leisure. This does not mean stripping life of spontaneity but rather ensuring that the foundations, work, health, relationships, personal growth, are not neglected in favor of fleeting impulses. Without foresight, time slips into chaos. With foresight, it becomes a structured flow where priorities are honored. Another key aspect of wise time management is presence. It is possible to schedule every hour yet still waste time if your mind is scattered. To manage time wisely is not only to allocate hours but also to inhabit them fully. When you work, focus deeply. When you rest, rest without guilt. When you are with loved ones, give them undivided attention. Divided attention dilutes time, making hours feel shallow, while presence deepens them, turning moments into memories and tasks into accomplishments. Managing time wisely also means respecting the natural limits of your energy. Time is not only measured by the clock but by the quality of attention and vitality you can bring to it. Ignoring rest, skipping sleep, or overloading yourself may seem like saving time in the short run, but in truth it robs you of clarity and strength, leaving future hours less productive and more fragile. Wise use of time includes balance, work paired with renewal, effort paired with recovery. This balance ensures that your time is not just full, but fruitful. At a deeper level, managing time wisely is an act of self-respect. When you waste time on trivialities or procrastination, you are not merely delaying tasks, you are diminishing your own potential. Each hour squandered is an hour of your life traded for nothing. But when you use time wisely, you affirm the value of your existence, treating your days as precious opportunities to build, create, connect, and grow. It is a way of saying, my life matters enough that I will not carelessly spend its most limited resource. There is also a moral dimension to time management. Your time is not only yours, it affects others. When you misuse your hours, you may neglect responsibilities, strain relationships, or arrive unprepared, forcing others to bear the weight of your disorganization. Conversely, when you manage time wisely, you show reliability, respect, and care for those around you. You arrive when promised, deliver what you committed to, and create space to be present for others without resentment or rush. Ultimately, to manage your time wisely is to design your days with intention, to recognize that every moment is a choice between what drains and what builds, between what distracts and what fulfills. It is not about cramming every hour with productivity but about ensuring that your time reflects your deepest values. A life managed poorly dissolves into regret, with years spent on things that never truly mattered. A life managed wisely becomes one of balance, purpose, and meaning, where each day contributes to the larger vision of the life you wish to live. Value experiences over possessions. To value experiences over possessions is to recognize that the deepest and most enduring forms of happiness come not from what you own, but from what you live through. Possessions can certainly bring comfort and utility, and they often carry a sense of pride when first acquired, but their glow fades quickly. The new car loses its shine, the expensive gadget grows outdated, the fashionable clothes drift out of style. Objects can be stolen, broken, or forgotten. Experiences, however, become part of you. They imprint themselves into memory, shaping your identity, enriching your perspective, and deepening your connections with others. Experiences carry a power that possessions cannot replicate because they engage the heart as well as the mind. A meal shared with friends, a journey to a new place, the thrill of learning a skill, or the quiet joy of watching a sunrise, these moments lodge themselves in memory not only for what happened, but for how you felt. Unlike possessions, which eventually sit in closets or garages, experiences grow more valuable over time. They can be retold as stories, reflected upon in solitude, or revisited with a smile years later. Even difficult experiences, once endured, often gain meaning in hindsight, teaching lessons that objects could never provide. Valuing experiences also strengthens human connection. Possessions are often isolating, used individually or compared competitively, but experiences are frequently shared. Traveling with friends, celebrating milestones, working together on a project, or even simply walking and talking with someone creates bonds that possessions cannot forge. When people recall their lives, they do not list the things they bought, they remember who they were with, what they felt, and the moments of laughter, challenge, or wonder that shaped their relationships. Experiences are the threads that weave people together into communities and families. This rule is also about perspective. Possessions encourage a mindset of accumulation, more, newer, better. Experiences encourage a mindset of engagement, deeper, fuller, richer. When you chase possessions, you measure your life by what you own and always feel a step behind, because there will always be someone with more. When you prioritize experiences, you measure your life by what you have lived, and this metric belongs entirely to you, beyond comparison. Your experiences are uniquely yours, and no one can take them or diminish their worth. Moreover, valuing experiences over possessions guards against the emptiness of materialism. Many people seek happiness in objects, only to find themselves dissatisfied once the novelty wears off. This cycle of desire and disappointment fuels endless consumption without delivering lasting joy. Experiences, by contrast, satisfy more deeply because they engage curiosity, growth, and emotion. They give you stories to tell, wisdom to share, and memories to treasure. They nourish not just your lifestyle, but your soul. Experiences also foster growth in ways possessions rarely can. Buying something requires money, living through something often requires courage, openness, and effort. To travel, you must step outside the familiar. To learn a new skill, you must be willing to be a beginner. To connect deeply with someone, you must risk vulnerability. These challenges expand your capacity, broaden your perspective, and make you more resilient. Possessions may decorate your environment, but experiences develop your character. At its heart, to value experiences over possessions is to live fully in the moment. Experiences demand presence, you cannot stockpile them for later use or leave them sitting on a shelf. You must engage with them as they unfold. This presence deepens your awareness of life's richness and reminds you that time is the true currency of existence. Each day spent chasing possessions is a day spent in pursuit of things that will not last, while each day spent creating or savoring experiences is an investment in memories that grow more precious as time passes. Ultimately, this rule is about choosing meaning over material, depth over surface, and life lived over life displayed. It is the recognition that when the years pass and possessions fade, what will remain are the stories, the lessons, the laughter, the adventures, and the connections that experiences brought. To value experiences over possessions is to fill your life not with things, but with moments that shape who you are and leave behind a legacy that no object could ever replace. Listen more than you speak. Listen more than you speak is not a call for silence, but a discipline of attention. Speaking often feels like the active part of communication, but listening is what gives speech its meaning. When you listen, you gather context, you understand not only the words but the pauses, the hesitations, the tone that carries unspoken feelings. Speaking too quickly, too often, assumes that you already know enough, that your perspective is complete. Listening, on the other hand, admits that you do not. It leaves space for learning, for surprise, for the truth that other people's experiences hold fragments of reality you have never touched. The habit of listening reshapes not only conversations, but relationships, and through them, the quality of your life. When you speak more than you listen, you begin to live inside an echo chamber of your own making. Every story you tell, every opinion you assert, reinforces what you already believe. It feels satisfying in the moment because self-expression can mimic clarity. But clarity rarely comes from hearing yourself, it comes from encountering perspectives that stretch your mind. The person who listens first gains access to hidden details, to motives behind decisions, to lessons carved from mistakes you have not yet made. Listening is an act of humility, because it starts with the premise that someone else knows something you do not. That humility is the foundation of wisdom. Listening does not mean remaining passive or mute. It means directing your energy toward understanding before insisting on being understood. Many people listen only as a pause before they speak, already composing their reply while the other person is mid-sentence. That is not listening, it is waiting for your turn. True listening suspends judgment. It asks, what does this person mean? What are they feeling? What are they trying to tell me beyond the words they chose? It requires patience, because meaning is not always obvious. Sometimes you have to sit with silence, let a thought finish unfolding, resist the temptation to fill gaps with your own voice. In those gaps, trust is built. People open more when they feel heard, and once trust exists, honesty follows. In business, in friendship, in love, the listener gains the advantage of truth. There is also a practical reason for listening more: it reduces error. When you speak without listening, you act on incomplete information. You assume needs, misread intentions, and respond to what you think you heard instead of what was said. Entire conflicts bloom from words planted in the soil of misunderstanding. Listening prevents this. It slows you down long enough to check assumptions. It shows respect for complexity, the truth that most issues are not as simple as they seem from the outside. Even in negotiation, where speech seems like power, the skilled listener holds the stronger position because they understand the other side's priorities and pressures before revealing their own. Listening is also a gift. In a noisy world, to listen deeply is to tell someone, "You matter, your thoughts deserve space." It is a rare kindness because attention has become scarce currency. When you give it freely, you create connection. People remember the one who listened, not the one who interrupted with cleverness. Over time, this builds influence, not through dominance, but through trust. Ironically, those who speak least in meetings often shape outcomes the most, because their words carry weight earned by careful listening. But this rule applies beyond conversations with others. Listening more than you speak includes listening to what is not external: your own thoughts, your own body, the signals of fatigue, intuition, or doubt. Speaking can drown out those signals because constant output leaves no room for reflection. Listening requires stillness, and stillness is where clarity lives. The great mistakes of life often happen when people rush to declare, decide, or defend without listening to others, to context, to themselves. This is not an argument for permanent silence. There are times to speak boldly, to advocate, to lead. But when speech is your default, when your first instinct is to fill space with words, you risk missing the thread of what matters. Listening first is not weakness, it is strategic patience. It lets others reveal themselves before you commit to a position. It makes your words more precise because they come after understanding. It gives conversations depth instead of noise. To listen more than you speak is, in the end, to choose growth over ego. Speaking feeds the self you already are, listening creates the self you are still becoming. Every person you meet knows something you do not. Every story they carry can teach you, warn you, inspire you. But only if you are quiet long enough to hear it. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't compare yourself to others is both a comfort and a sharp warning: comfort because it frees you from an endless scoreboard you never agreed to join, and a warning because comparison quietly reshapes what you value until your life is measured by other people's highlight reels. On the surface, comparing seems logical. How else do we know if we're doing well? But beneath that logic are habits of mind that steal clarity. Comparison takes a neutral fact, someone else did X, and turns it into a verdict about your worth. It converts a momentary observation into a permanent identity: I'm late, I'm small, I'm not enough. That conversion is the real harm, because it makes external, often irrelevant measures the rulers of your inner life. Why this is so seductive is partly biological and partly cultural. Humans are social animals wired to evaluate status and fit. Historically, knowing your place in the group mattered for survival. Today the environment has changed, but the machinery hasn't. Social media, curated resumes, and selective storytelling amplify rare successes and hide context, and our brains keep doing the same quick, noisy comparisons as if that information were complete. Add cognitive biases, survivorship bias: you see winners, not the many who failed trying the same thing; availability bias: the loud, recent stories loom large; and context ignorance: different starting points, resources, health, luck, and what you're comparing against is rarely comparable. A friend's Instagram shows travel, not debt; a colleague's promotion shows result, not the network, timing, or trade-offs behind it. Every comparison that ignores context is a trap. The emotional consequences are predictable and cumulative. A single comparison might sting, but repeated exposure rewires motivation into two unhealthy poles, the toxic chase and the paralytic slump. In the chase, you ratchet towards someone else's standard: more money, more followers, more achievements, often sacrificing values or pleasure to meet a metric that was never yours. In the slump, comparisons tell you can't win, so you withdraw, reduce ambition, and lower your expectations to protect yourself from repeated failure. Both paths erode joy, creativity, and authenticity. They also distort relationships. Comparing breeds envy, secrecy, or performative success, while honest connection needs vulnerability and shared imperfections. Worse, comparison corrodes the trust you need to try hard things, because every attempt becomes another public test against someone else's best moment. That said, not all looking outward is bad. There's a difference between comparison as identity and comparison as information. Healthy benchmarking borrows useful data, study a better run process, learn one person's approach to a shared problem, use a model as inspiration. The line is whether you let the benchmark define you or inform you. If you admire a colleague's project management and adopt their technique to improve your own workflow, you're using comparison productively. If you measure your worth only by how many projects they've shipped, you're trapped. The same with role models: emulate habits, not headlines. So what actually helps? Begin by changing the default question. Instead of asking, "How do I stack up?" ask, "What did I do today that moves me toward the life I want?" That single shift moves the locus of control inward. Build a practice of comparing to past versions of yourself, last month, last year, because progress is meaningful even when it's invisible to other people. Keep a progress file, small wins, gratitude notes, emails that show growth. When you read it back in darker moments, the file argues more persuasively than an Instagram scroll. Train your attention with short experiments: a 30-day comparison fast, limit social media, unfollow accounts that trigger envy, a week where you publicly share one honest struggle, or a daily 2-minute gratitude ritual that lists what you did well that day. These concrete habits rewire the reflex to look outward into a habit of inward accounting. Practice reappraisal when the comparison impulse hits. Notice the physiological cue: tight chest. Racing mind, name the thought, "I'm comparing," and then ask 3 questions. Is the comparison based on complete information? Is it measuring a value I actually care about? If I stopped comparing, what would I do differently? This little cognitive triage cuts through the automatic story and gives you agency. Pair that with self-compassion. Speak to yourself as you would to a friend who was unfairly diminished by someone else's success. Kindness dissolves shame, and without shame the need to prove yourself in other people's terms loses its urgency. Create structures that reduce temptation. Curate your feed, remove the accounts that make you feel small and follow ones that teach craft, curiosity, or resilience. Arrange your calendar so you have time for deep work and reflection rather than endless social checking. Surround yourself with people who model humility and curiosity, those who celebrate others' wins without shrinking you. Seek mentors who give honest feedback on performance rather than knee-jerk comparisons. A good mentor tells you what you need to learn and what is outside your control. Remember context when you do compare. Timelines, privilege, trade-offs, and luck matter. Someone's triumph often costs them something you don't see: time with family, mental health, or the kind of work that fills them. When comparison tempts you to feel cheated, flip the script and study the trade-offs. Decide consciously what you are willing to pay for success and what you are not. That decision returns the power of choice to you and makes your goals explicit rather than reactive. In practical terms, translate values into metrics that matter to you. If you value curiosity, measure the number of new ideas you tried this month. If you value presence, measure dinners with family without screens. If you value craft, count deliberate practice hours. Personal metrics are not about vanity, they are about clarity. When your measures match your values, comparisons to others lose their grip because you're playing a game whose score you set. Over time, living without constant comparison enlarges the inner life. You become more attuned to process than to applause, to learning than to proving, to contribution than to scoreboard position. That doesn't mean complacency or ignoring excellence, it means the pursuit of excellence is motivated by love of the work, not the fear of being less than someone else. It makes success sweeter because it's chosen, not borrowed, and failure more instructive because it's your lesson, not a public indictment. Finally, cultivate a long horizon. Most meaningful things, mastery, relationships, character, assemble slowly and irregularly. The apparent early winner often burns out, the late starter accumulates depth. When you stop measuring your days against other people's highlights, you gain the patience to do messy, honest work. You discover, as many people do eventually, that the comparison habit is a thief that can be outwitted, by attention redirected, by metrics reclaimed, by compassion practiced, and by a daily insistence that your life be judged by your own standards. Don't let someone else's progress report write the story of your worth. Your path, with its unique speed and detours, is enough to build a life worth living. Respect yourself. Respecting yourself is the foundation of how you live, because every choice you make flows from what you believe you deserve. When you respect yourself, you set standards for how others may treat you, for what you will tolerate, and for the life you are willing to build. Without self-respect, you drift, accepting relationships that diminish you, jobs that exploit you, and habits that hollow you out. Respecting yourself is not arrogance, it is the quiet recognition of your worth and the unwillingness to trade that worth for approval, convenience, or temporary comfort. It means understanding that you are not replaceable and therefore should not live as if you are disposable. Self-respect begins in the small, private choices no one else sees. It is in the decision to keep a promise to yourself, even when no one will know if you break it. It is in the discipline to say no when something violates your values, even if saying yes would win applause. It is in taking care of your body, because you know it carries you through every dream you hope to realize. It is in guarding your time, because you understand that your life is measured in hours and what you give away too easily can never be reclaimed. These acts seem minor in isolation, but together they become the architecture of dignity. People who respect themselves walk differently, speak differently, and attract relationships that mirror that respect back to them. When you fail to respect yourself, the consequences are subtle at first and brutal later. You compromise on things that matter because you fear conflict. You allow people to cross boundaries because you confuse kindness with self-erasure. You chase validation because you do not believe your worth exists without someone else's approval. Over time, this erodes confidence, and life becomes reactive instead of intentional. You start to accept less than you deserve not because you cannot do better, but because you have forgotten that you deserve better. Self-disrespect rarely arrives with a single catastrophic choice, it creeps in through a series of small surrenders, agreeing to things that exhaust you, laughing at jokes that belittle you, staying silent when your voice should speak. Respecting yourself does not mean isolating yourself or building walls against everyone. It means creating boundaries that protect your well-being without shutting out love, growth, and connection. Boundaries are not barriers, they are the framework that allows relationships to thrive without corrosion. When you respect yourself, you can forgive without becoming a doormat, love without losing your identity, and compromise without self-erasure. It gives you the strength to walk away from what wounds you, not out of pride, but out of preservation. There is a deep connection between self-respect and responsibility. When you respect yourself, you stop blaming others for the state of your life. You take ownership because you know you have agency. You care about the quality of your work, the words you speak, the company you keep. You demand excellence from yourself not because you seek perfection, but because you know that cutting corners chips away at your integrity. Self-respect turns discipline from punishment into a form of self-love. You work hard, not because someone is watching, but because you are. Respecting yourself also influences how others see you. People take cues from how you treat yourself. If you constantly put yourself last, others will assume you are comfortable being last. If you allow disrespect, it becomes permission. If you consistently undervalue your time, others will too. But when you carry yourself with quiet confidence, when you do not tolerate lies, when you do not cling to those who diminish you, when you decline what insults your soul, people notice. They may not always like it, but they respect it, because respect begins where self-respect lives. This rule is not about ego or superiority, it is about alignment. When your actions align with your values, you live without the corrosive weight of regret. When your choices reflect your worth, you move through life with steadiness rather than desperation. You become less likely to compromise in harmful ways because you have something solid to stand on, the knowledge that you matter. And when you truly respect yourself, you do not need to announce it. It shows in your posture, your tone, your decisions, your refusal to settle for what starves your soul. In the end, respecting yourself is a lifelong commitment, renewed every day in small decisions. It is saying, I will not betray myself to please others. I will not shrink so someone else can feel taller. I will not barter my dignity for approval that fades. It is understanding that you teach the world how to treat you by the example of how you treat yourself. And if you cannot give yourself respect, no amount of applause will fill the hollow that neglect leaves behind. Apologize when you're wrong. Apologizing when you're wrong is an act that sits at the intersection of humility, responsibility, and repair. It is less about groveling and more about restoring the social and moral fabric that your action, however small or large, has frayed. At its best, an apology is a clear admission that something you did, or failed to do, caused harm or erosion of trust, a recognition that the harm matters, an acceptance of responsibility without excuses, and a commitment to change or make amends. Saying the words, "I'm sorry," is only the most visible part of a larger process, the internal acceptance of error, the outward communication of regret, and the outward follow-through that demonstrates you meant it. Skipping any of these stages turns an apology into a hollow ritual or a manipulative tactic. Keeping them creates an opportunity for healing, growth, and stronger relationships. People resist apologies for many reasons: pride, fear of consequences, uncertainty about what to say, or the illusion that admitting fault weakens their position. Paradoxically, honest apology usually strengthens credibility. Owning a mistake signals maturity. It reassures others that you are aware of reality and willing to align your behavior with your values. In families and friendships, apologies stop resentments from accumulating. In workplaces, they preserve collaboration and avert dysfunction. In leadership, they model accountability and set cultural norms. Beyond the social consequences, the act of apologizing is psychologically liberating. It reduces the cognitive load of guilt, opens the possibility of forgiveness, and lets you focus energy on corrective action rather than on defending or reinterpreting what happened. What makes an apology effective is not theatrics but clarity and specificity. Vague or conditional apologies, "I'm sorry if you were offended," or "I'm sorry you feel that way," place the burden of harm on the injured party's perception rather than on the actor's behavior. They sound defensive and usually deepen hurt. A strong apology names the behavior and its impact. "I'm sorry I raised my voice at the meeting, and I realized that it embarrassed you and shut down the team conversation," accepts responsibility without qualifiers, and avoids shifting blame or minimizing. "I had a bad day," can contextualize but not excuse. Tone matters. Calm, direct, and unhurried speech communicates sincerity more than melodramatics. Timing and privacy matter too. Some wrongs require public acknowledgement because the harm was public, while others are best addressed privately. Repair is the piece that separates words from character. An apology should usually include a concrete offer to make amends or a plan to prevent recurrence, "I'll cover the missed deadline this week and set up a timeline to avoid it happening again," or "I'll listen without interruption next time and I'm going to speak with HR to ensure this isn't repeated." If the harmed person lists ways to repair the damage, take them seriously. If they are not ready to accept the apology, accept their boundary and continue to act consistently. Apology does not automatically demand forgiveness, and forgiveness, if it comes, should be granted freely, not pressured. Respect the injured party's process and timeline. Sometimes repair is a slow, demonstrable sequence rather than an instantaneous reset. There are important pitfalls to avoid. Apologizing to avoid consequences or to manipulate outcomes undermines integrity and teaches others to distrust your words. Over-apologizing for things that are not yours to carry, apologizing for being alive, for your identity, or for another person's choices, erodes self-respect and can enable unhealthy dynamics. Likewise, apologies that are one-off without any change in behavior become performative and breed cynicism. A leader who habitually apologizes publicly after every scandal but fails to alter the underlying system will lose moral authority. The antidote to performative apology is aligned action. Match words with measurable changes, policies, or restitutions where appropriate. Deciding when to apologize is not always obvious. If your action contributed, even indirectly, to someone's harm, an apology is usually appropriate. That includes careless comments, missed commitments, thoughtless jokes, neglect, and outright wrongs. It also includes systemic or institutional harms where personal complicity exists. In those cases, apology should be paired with structural remedies, not merely personal regret. Conversely, you do not need to apologize for reasonable boundaries, for refusing to be complicit, or for asserting your dignity. Distinguish between owning mistakes and accepting blame for outcomes you did not cause. There are practical steps to make apologies easier and more effective. Reflect first, name clearly what you did and how it affected the other person. Choose the right setting and moment. Don't apologize in haste or in the middle of a fight if you can postpone for a calm conversation. Speak plainly and sincerely. Use I language to avoid passive constructions. Offer a repair, and ask if there is anything you can do. Listen to the response without interrupting, and avoid retracting your apology even if the other person responds angrily. That reaction is part of their process. Finally, follow up later with sustained behavior change. Let your future actions prove the authenticity of your words. Self-forgiveness belongs with apology. Owning a mistake does not mean you must be consumed by shame. Apologize, make amends, learn the lesson, and allow yourself to move forward with a plan that reduces the chance of repetition. Use the error as data rather than as a verdict on your worth. At the same time, don't shortcut the moral economy. Forgiveness of self should not erase accountability in cases where restitution, correction, or further consequences are necessary. Culturally, the form and expectations of apology vary. Some societies emphasize public acknowledgement, others value private reconciliation, but the underlying ethics are consistent: honesty, responsibility, and repair. In workplaces, craft policies that encourage candid admission of error without punitive reflexes that incentivize cover-ups. In families, teach children the difference between a sincere apology and a reflexive "I'm sorry" that is used merely to appease adults. In friendships, model how apology can strengthen, rather than weaken, bonds. Apologizing when you're wrong is not a one-time transaction, it is a habit of moral responsiveness. It trains your conscience to notice harm, your courage to admit fault, and your discipline to change. Over time, it cultivates relationships built on trust rather than convenience, reputations grounded in integrity rather than image, and a character that is honest enough to fail and brave enough to repair. In a world where blame is easy and accountability rarer, the willingness to apologize becomes a quiet but powerful engine of repair, learning, and dignity, for others and for yourself. Face your fears. To face your fears is to stop letting the most anxious parts of your mind make decisions on your behalf. Fear is not your enemy, it is a signal, sometimes accurate, often exaggerated, that something you care about is at stake. Left unexamined, fear quietly reshapes your life, it narrows your world, delays your dreams, keeps you small, and convinces you the cage is safer than the open air. Facing fear is not about erasing it or pretending to be fearless, it is about choosing to move toward what matters even while your heart beats fast. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision that something else is more important. Fear thrives in shadows and speculation. In your head, problems grow teeth and become monstrous possibilities. What if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I'm not enough? Avoidance provides immediate relief, and that relief is seductive. But avoidance also teaches your nervous system the wrong lesson. This situation must be dangerous, because I ran from it and felt better. Each retreat reinforces the fear, and the path of least resistance becomes the path of least life. To face your fears breaks this cycle. It replaces imagined catastrophes with direct experience. You learn, through action, that most discomfort is survivable, that anxiety spikes and then subsides, and that reality is rarely as brutal as the mind's worst-case theater. This rule asks for honesty about the cost of fear. It is easy to see the risk of acting, embarrassment, rejection, uncertainty, but harder to see the risk of not acting, opportunities that never return, relationships that never deepen, skills that never form, respect for yourself that quietly erodes. There is a hidden grief in a fear-led life, the grief of unlived possibilities. Facing fear is a way of grieving in advance what you are unwilling to lose, your potential, your integrity, your one brief chance to become who you might be. Facing fear is not recklessness. It is calibrated exposure, meeting the thing you fear at a level that stretches you but does not break you. You name it precisely instead of letting it loom: the presentation, the phone call, the doctor's appointment, the boundary with someone you love, the first step toward a new career. Then you approach it in workable doses. Small action is not small if it moves you forward. Your nervous system learns from repetition, not from grand gestures. With each attempt, your world expands by a measurable inch. Confidence, in this sense, is not a feeling you wait for, it is a byproduct of doing hard things imperfectly until they are no longer hard. There is wisdom in listening to fear's information while ignoring its tyranny. Some fears point to real hazards, and prudence is part of courage. Prepare, gather facts, ask for help, mitigate unnecessary risk. But many fears are about ego wounds rather than mortal danger: the fear of looking foolish, of being seen as ordinary, of discovering your limits. These fears are growth markers disguised as threats. When you treat them as invitations, they refine you. You become less managed by approval, more oriented toward truth and craft. The body speaks fear in sensation: tight chest, shallow breath, hot face, shaky hands. Learning to stay with these sensations without interpreting them as stop signs is a crucial skill. Breathe more slowly than the anxiety urges. Ground your attention in what is actually happening: the chair under you, the words in front of you, the person across from you. Name the feeling without dramatizing it: I'm anxious and I can still proceed. This is not positive thinking, it is accurate thinking. The storm in the body can coexist with clear action. Facing fear also clarifies identity. Each time you act in alignment with your values while afraid, you prove to yourself that you are the kind of person who can be trusted under pressure. Self-respect is earned in these private trials: the 6 a.m. practice when no one is watching, the apology you would rather avoid, the application you submit despite the odds. Over time, this becomes a quiet strength. You no longer need to perform bravery, you know you can rely on yourself. The social dimension matters. 2. Fear shrinks in the presence of support. Share your intentions with someone who won't rescue you from discomfort but will encourage follow-through. Mentors and peers can lend you a steadier nervous system when yours wobbles. At the same time, be wary of letting others' fears become your limits. Well-meaning people often project their anxieties as advice. Listen, consider, but take responsibility for your own risk tolerance and aims. Not every fear will be conquered completely, and that is fine. The goal is not to become immune to fear but fluent with it, to recognize its voice, test its claims, and proceed when the mission warrants it. Some doors will stay closed, others will open into rooms you could not have imagined from the hallway. Progress will be uneven. You will take 2 steps forward and 1 back. Keep going. The measure is not whether fear disappears, it is whether your life keeps getting bigger. Ultimately, facing your fears is a way of telling the truth about what you want and who you are willing to become. It is a refusal to let discomfort dictate destiny. The world does not owe you certainty or safety before you begin. Begin anyway. Let your actions teach your mind what you can handle. On the other side of fear is not guaranteed success, but it is guaranteed growth, and a life that is earned, not imagined. Simplify when possible. To simplify when possible is to acknowledge a truth that is easy to ignore in a world obsessed with more. Complexity, left unchecked, accumulates like sediment. It layers your schedule, your possessions, your commitments, your systems, and your mind until every decision feels heavier than it needs to be. Complexity promises control and sophistication, but often it delivers confusion, inefficiency, and stress. Simplicity, by contrast, is not deprivation, it is deliberate subtraction, the art of removing what does not serve so that what truly matters has room to breathe. When you choose simplicity, you are not choosing smallness, you are choosing clarity, focus, and depth over clutter, distraction, and excess. Simplifying starts with the recognition that everything in life carries a cognitive cost. Every object in your home requires storage and maintenance. Every subscription in your inbox requires filtering. Every commitment on your calendar demands energy, even if only to decide whether to keep it. Every feature you add to a project creates more points of failure and more complexity in future iterations. Each of these by itself may seem trivial, but collectively they create friction that erodes mental bandwidth and makes progress harder. Simplification is the antidote, a systematic habit of asking, what can I remove without losing value? What can I streamline without sacrificing quality? At the practical level, simplification often begins in the physical world. A cluttered environment competes for attention, triggering microstressors every time your eyes land on an unfinished pile or an unused object. Removing what you do not use or love is not a mere aesthetic exercise, it is an act of reclaiming focus. Fewer things mean fewer decisions and less maintenance. The same principle applies digitally. Too many apps, tabs, or notifications fragment attention and create false urgency. Simplifying means auditing what you have allowed in and curating ruthlessly. Delete apps you never open, unsubscribe from newsletters you don't read, archive old files. Make your digital tools serve you rather than enslave you. Schedules and commitments are another arena where complexity accumulates invisibly. We say yes reflexively to meetings, favors, events, because saying no feels uncomfortable in the moment, and we forget that every yes is a future cost. Simplification here means practicing strategic refusal. Decline what does not align with your values or current priorities, even if it flatters your ego or avoids awkwardness. Batch tasks instead of scattering them. Create rituals and templates that reduce decision fatigue, meal plans, standard responses, automated bill payments. Build witty space into your calendar, because empty space is not wasted time, it is the condition for deep work, creativity, and rest. Mental simplification is both harder and more profound. It requires confronting the stories and expectations that drive unnecessary complexity, the belief that more is always better, that status comes from accumulation, that saying yes proves worth, that a busy life is a meaningful life. These scripts push you toward excess and away from clarity. To simplify your mind, Practice identifying which problems are truly yours to solve and which belong to others. Stop rehearsing conversations that may never happen. Limit your attention diet, fewer news cycles, fewer doom-scrolling sessions, fewer shallow inputs, and replace them with deliberate, high-quality information and silence. Complexity in thought often mirrors complexity in life. Clarity in thought enables simplicity in action. In work and creative endeavors, simplification is a superpower. Products fail not because they lack features but because they drown in them. Processes break down not because they lack steps but because they include too many unnecessary ones. Writing becomes unreadable when padded with jargon and filler. In every domain, the question, "What is essential here?" acts as a scalpel. Great design, great leadership, and great communication all share this bias for essence: include what matters, remove what does not, and resist the vanity of excess complexity disguised as sophistication. The fear behind resistance to simplification is usually loss of control, options, or status. But simplicity does not mean absence of depth, it means concentration of value. When you own fewer but better things, your experience of them deepens. When you do fewer but more aligned activities, your impact multiplies. When you speak with fewer but sharper words, your message lands with force. In relationships, simplifying means reducing drama, eliminating unnecessary games, and replacing vague expectations with clear agreements. It does not shrink life, it enlarges it by stripping away what crowds out meaning. To make simplification a practice, build habits that force selection. Before adding anything, an object, an obligation, a tool, ask, what does this replace? Create an exit plan for everything you allow in: subscriptions, memberships, projects. Regularly review and prune, monthly for your calendar, quarterly for possessions, yearly for major commitments. Use constraints as allies. Limit the number of clothes you own, apps you use, or goals you pursue at one time. Constraints are not punishments, they are architecture for freedom. They focus your energy where it matters instead of scattering it across trivialities. The benefits compound. Simplification lowers stress because there are fewer moving parts to manage. It accelerates decisions because choices shrink. It improves quality because attention is no longer diluted. It increases resilience because fewer dependencies mean fewer points of failure. Perhaps most importantly, it creates space for presence, for spontaneity, for what cannot be scheduled or purchased but gives life its texture: conversations that linger, projects that require depth, walks without agenda, thought without interruption. Simplify when possible because life, left to its own devices, becomes crowded and noisy. Complexity creeps in uninvited, simplicity must be chosen again and again. Choose it not because it is trendy or minimalistic but because it aligns your outer world with your inner priorities. Choose it so that when the essential calls, your health, your relationships, your creative work, you have the capacity to answer without the drag of 100 trivial obligations. Simplicity is not the absence of ambition, it is the refinement of it. It is the discipline of saying no to what is almost right so that you can say yes to what is deeply right. And that, in the end, is not about doing less, it is about living more. Practice gratitude. To practice gratitude is to train the mind and heart to notice, acknowledge, and appreciate the good that already exists in your life, rather than being consumed by what is missing or what has gone wrong. It is the deliberate act of shifting focus away from scarcity and dissatisfaction toward abundance and sufficiency. Gratitude is not about ignoring pain, difficulty, or injustice, it is about refusing to let them eclipse the countless blessings, large and small, that coexist alongside them. To live with gratitude is to understand that joy does not come only from acquiring more, but from valuing what is already present. Gratitude begins with awareness. Most people move through life on autopilot, taking daily comforts and privileges for granted. The roof overhead, the meal on the table, the presence of a friend, the beating of a healthy heart, these become invisible when the mind is fixed on what is lacking. Practicing gratitude requires slowing down enough to see these things clearly and naming them for what they are: gifts. The simple act of noticing shifts the inner narrative from, "I don't have enough," to, "I already have more than I realized." This subtle change transforms discontent into contentment, scarcity into abundance. Gratitude also cultivates humility. To feel grateful is to recognize that much of what sustains and enriches your life comes not from you alone but from the efforts and kindness of others. Every bite of food represents the labor of farmers, transporters, cooks, and countless unseen hands. Every friendship is a gift of trust and time. Every opportunity is shaped, at least in part, by the support, sacrifices, or generosity of others. Gratitude keeps the ego in check, reminding you that you are interconnected with a wider web of people and forces. This practice has the power to transform relationships. When you regularly express gratitude to others, you affirm their value, strengthening bonds and creating a culture of mutual respect. Simple acknowledgments, a thank you for someone's help, recognition of effort, or appreciation for presence, nourish relationships more than grand gestures ever could. Conversely, taking others for granted erodes trust and closeness. Gratitude, then, becomes not just a personal virtue but a social glue, deepening connection and fostering goodwill. On a psychological level, gratitude shifts the mind away from comparison. Much of modern dissatisfaction comes from measuring yourself against others, focusing on what they have that you lack. Gratitude interrupts this cycle by redirecting attention to the unique blessings of your own life. Instead of envying someone else's path, you learn to honor your own. Over time, this practice strengthens resilience, because a grateful mind can find reasons for hope and joy even amid hardship. It does not deny struggle but balances it with recognition of what still remains good. Gratitude also nurtures patience and perspective. In difficult seasons, it is easy to feel as if all is lost, but gratitude reminds you that life is rarely all one thing. Even in loss, there is memory to cherish. Even in illness, there may be care and love surrounding you. Even in failure, there are lessons and second chances. Gratitude does not eliminate pain, but it softens it by showing that hardship does not define the whole of existence. It teaches you to see the bigger picture, where joy and sorrow intermingle, and where light still shines even in dark times. To practice gratitude is not only to feel it but to express it. Writing down what you are thankful for, speaking words of appreciation, or even silently acknowledging a blessing reinforces the habit. Gratitude grows stronger with repetition. The more you practice it, the more naturally it arises. Over time, it reshapes your perception of life, creating a mindset that seeks good rather than dwelling on lack. What once felt ordinary becomes extraordinary: a simple meal, a kind word, a moment of peace. Ultimately, practicing gratitude is a way of choosing how to live. It is deciding to look at life through the lens of abundance rather than scarcity, to treasure what you already have rather than endlessly chase what you do not. Gratitude grounds you in the present moment, reminding you that joy is not something to be postponed until conditions are perfect but something available here and now. To live with gratitude is to live with fullness, because even when life is imperfect, you see clearly how much there still is to honor, to celebrate, and to hold dear. Be adaptable. Being adaptable means embracing the truth that life is fluid, unpredictable, and often indifferent to your plans. No matter how carefully you design your path, circumstances will change, sometimes gradually, sometimes abruptly, and your survival, success, and peace of mind depend on your ability to adjust without losing your core. Adaptability is not passive resignation, it is active recalibration, a mindset that treats uncertainty not as a threat but as a constant reality. The adaptable person knows that rigidity is brittle. It may feel strong, but it shatters under pressure. Flexibility, by contrast, bends without breaking, absorbing shocks and redirecting energy toward what can still be shaped. At its essence, adaptability is about perception. When faced with unexpected events, a lost job, a health crisis, a broken relationship, a technological disruption, the rigid mind fixates on what should have been, replaying the script of the ideal scenario that no longer exists. This fixation drains energy, breeds resentment, and delays constructive action. The adaptable mind, on the other hand, acknowledges reality quickly and asks, "What now?" rather than "Why me?" It does not deny disappointment or pain, it processes them, then pivots. This speed of adjustment often determines not only outcomes but also emotional well-being. Those who cling to obsolete expectations suffer twice, once from the change itself and again from their resistance to it. Adaptability also requires humility. To adapt, you must admit that you do not know everything, that your assumptions may no longer hold, that your previous strategies may no longer work. Many resist this because it feels like weakness or failure, but in truth, it is strength. The world belongs to those who learn faster than they lament. Humility opens the door to new information, new methods, and new alliances. Without it, you stay trapped in outdated habits while reality moves on. History is filled with individuals, companies, and even civilizations that perished not because they lacked resources but because they lacked flexibility, the ability to unlearn and relearn when the environment shifted. Adaptability also operates at multiple levels: emotional, cognitive, and behavioral. Emotionally, it means managing fear and frustration so they do not paralyze you. This does not mean pretending to like change but learning to tolerate its discomfort long enough to navigate it. Cognitively, it means reframing challenges as data rather than disasters, seeing problems as puzzles rather than verdicts. Behaviorally, it means experimenting with new actions rather than clinging to old routines out of nostalgia or pride. For example, if a project collapses, adaptability looks like salvaging what works, discarding what doesn't, and trying an alternative route rather than abandoning the mission entirely or doubling down on a failing plan. In practice, adaptability is built through micro-choices. When plans derail, do you pause and improvise, or do you spiral into panic? When someone challenges your opinion, do you defend your stance at all costs, or do you consider the merit in their view? When technology changes your industry, do you resist until you become obsolete, or do you invest time in learning? These moments feel small, but they train the reflex of flexibility. Over time, adaptability becomes less about reacting and more about anticipating. You stop expecting permanence and start designing with change in mind, creating systems, goals, and identities that can evolve without collapsing. A key ingredient of adaptability is resilience, but resilience alone is not enough. Resilience helps you endure difficulty, adaptability helps you convert difficulty into opportunity. They work together. Resilience absorbs the impact, adaptability redirects the energy. This combination transforms setbacks into stepping stones because each disruption becomes a lesson rather than a life sentence. The adaptable person extracts insight: what worked until now, and why. What needs to change? What resources can be repurposed? This analytical flexibility turns chaos into a classroom and ensures that even failure pays dividends. Adaptability also requires a balance between flexibility and principle. It does not mean surrendering your values or identity at every turn. It means distinguishing between what is essential, your core beliefs, your ethical commitments, and what is negotiable, your methods, preferences, or timelines. If you adapt by abandoning everything you stand for, you are not flexible, you are rootless. But if you refuse to adapt anything, you are not principled, you are rigid. True adaptability is anchored fluidity, a tree that sways with the storm because its roots are deep enough to hold. Cultivating adaptability is a lifelong discipline. Start by embracing uncertainty as normal rather than exceptional. Expect plans to change so that when they do, you are not blindsided but prepared to pivot. Practice scenario thinking. If X happens, how could I respond? This mental rehearsal builds cognitive flexibility before crisis strikes. Strengthen your learning muscles, read widely, seek diverse perspectives, and expose yourself to environments that challenge your assumptions. The more mental models you possess, the faster you can reconfigure when one model fails. And above all, cultivate curiosity. A curious mind reacts to change with questions rather than panic, exploration rather than avoidance. The rewards of adaptability are immense. It reduces stress because you stop wasting energy fighting inevitabilities. It accelerates growth because every shift becomes a source of insight. It deepens relationships because you can adjust to others' needs without losing yourself. It enhances career resilience because you stay relevant in industries that evolve at dizzying speed. Most importantly, it gives you freedom, the freedom to thrive in a world that offers no guarantees except change. When you are adaptable, you do not fear the unknown, you work with it, shaping it where you can and flowing with it where you cannot. Life becomes less about clinging to a rigid script and more about mastering the art of improvisation, and that is a form of strength that endures when every other form fails. Be patient. Patience is the steady skill of keeping your nerve and attention across time, the quiet willingness to allow things to unfold without forcing or frantic pushing. It is not a passive surrender or a faint hope that things will fix themselves, it is an active stance that combines calm observation, intentional delay, and disciplined persistence. To be patient is to resist the short circuit of immediate gratification and reaction, to give processes the time they need to produce reliable outcomes. In a culture that prizes speed and visible results, patience looks unglamorous, but it is the engine behind deep learning, durable relationships, thoughtful decisions, and meaningful change. At its core, patience is partly emotional regulation and partly strategic timing. Emotionally, impatience is often a flood of anxiety, boredom, or frustrated desire that pushes you toward quick action just to get relief. When you practice patience, you learn to notice that surge without letting it decide for you. That recognition, I'm anxious, not urgent, creates a gap in which choice emerges. Strategically, patience gives you better information, rushing narrows your data, amplifies bias, and increases the chance of errors. Waiting to collect more evidence or to allow momentum to build often yields smarter, more proportionate moves. The patient person learns to separate heat from signal, to let time reveal what is important and what is merely loud. Patience is not the same as passivity. There are two kinds of patient people, the passive and the active. Passive patience is resignation, doing nothing while things deteriorate. Active patience is steady application with the long view in mind, practicing daily, making incremental improvements, tending relationships, and setting up conditions where slow processes can compound. A gardener practices active patience, they water, prune, and protect while knowing that growth is seasonal. In life and work, active patience looks like consistent practice on a skill, gradual savings and investment, regular care in relationships, or the methodical iteration of a project. It is patience chained to action, not patience as an excuse for inertia. The benefits are concrete and cumulative. Learning a craft requires thousands of repetitions, relationships deepen through repeated acts of trust, careers respond to years of incremental competence, health improves through steady habits. Patience prevents impulsive trade-offs, like accepting a job out of fear, reacting angrily and burning a bridge, or quitting a project at the first sign of difficulty, that produce long-term regret. It protects you from the volatility of short-term thinking and makes compounding possible, whether the compound is interest in a bank, skill in a practice, or goodwill in a friendship. Practicing patience is practical and trainable. Start small. When you feel the urge to respond immediately, an email, a comment, a purchase, delay by a concrete interval, one breath, 5 minutes, a night, and use that pause to reevaluate motive and consequence. Time-box tasks so you measure progress in short, repeatable units rather than waiting for a mythical final victory. Create micro-routines, a 5-minute daily practice that, maintained for months, yields disproportionate improvement. Keep a progress log that records tiny wins. Looking back at steady accumulation turns the abstract value of patience into visible evidence. Reframe unpleasant waiting as investment. Instead of thinking, "I'm wasting time," think, "I'm building leverage." Use curiosity. Ask what the delay is showing you, because curiosity reduces agitation and invites learning. There are embodied techniques that help. Slow your breath. 3 long exhales reset the nervous system more reliably than reasoning alone. Anchor attention in a single small action, pouring tea, doing 1 rep, writing 1 sentence, to interrupt the runaway mind. Practice acceptance of uncertainty by naming it out loud. I don't know the outcome yet. Naming reduces its emotional charge. Schedule reflection points, weekly, monthly, that force you to evaluate progress over time rather than by immediate feelings. Surround yourself with slower practices, reading books rather than skimming headlines. Walking rather than scrolling, to recalibrate your internal clock. Patience also has moral and relational dimensions. A patient listener affords others the space to speak and to change. A hurried listener interrupts and builds brittle ties. In parenting, teaching, and leadership, patience creates the safe conditions for growth. People learn at different paces, and impatience too often becomes punishment for being human. But patience should not be equivocated with tolerating abuse or injustice. There is a difference between enduring harm and choosing a long game. When something erodes your dignity, health, or values, the right move may be decisive action, not prolonged waiting. Patience must be guided by principles and boundaries. It should never be a method for postponing necessary confrontation or accountability. Recognize the cultural pressures that make patience hard. Modern systems reward immediacy, instant feedback, viral success, on-demand services, so you will often feel as though speed equals virtue. That's misleading. Many visible successes hide long, patient processes. Learn to value process over signal. When you see someone's overnight triumph, recall the many quiet hours that preceded it. Let that recalibration reduce envy and increase your own tolerance for steady effort. Finally, cultivate a long horizon in your thinking. Ask what your future self will thank you for: small investments, relationships tended, knowledge deepened. Then use that future gratitude as an anchor when impatience tugs you toward short-term fixes. Celebrate the small, non-spectacular wins that indicate compound progress. Over time, the habitual practice of patience reconfigures not just outcomes but temperament. You become more resilient, more measured, less reactive, and better at discerning what truly requires immediate action. Patience is not a passive virtue. It is an active mastery of time and impulse that converts daily consistency into the architecture of a life well built. Choose your company carefully. When you hear the phrase, "choose your company carefully," it sounds like simple advice about friendship, but it is really about the architecture of your future. The people you allow closest to you are not neutral, they are forces acting upon you, constantly and often invisibly. Their thoughts, habits, and values seep into your daily decisions through conversation, observation, and shared experience. This influence is rarely dramatic at first, it is subtle, cumulative, and therefore more powerful. A single remark can echo in your mind for years. A friend's attitude toward risk can either inspire you to pursue bold opportunities or convince you to stay in the safe and stagnant. Over time, their norms become your norms, not because you consciously agreed, but because humans are wired for imitation and belonging. Your environment is not just where you live, it is who you live among. Carefully choosing your company matters because we absorb more than words. We absorb energy, emotional climate, and unspoken rules. Spend enough time with people who complain constantly, and you will begin to frame your world through grievance rather than possibility. Surround yourself with those who take responsibility and act with integrity, and accountability will feel natural, not forced. If you live among people who celebrate curiosity, you will likely become more curious. If your circle values ambition and persistence, your own goals will expand to match. But if your social environment normalizes cutting corners, gossiping, or blaming circumstances, you will drift toward mediocrity without noticing. It is almost impossible to consistently rise above the standards of your closest companions, and it is surprisingly easy to sink to them. Being selective does not mean seeking perfection or rejecting anyone with flaws. Everyone is imperfect, including you. It means being intentional about patterns. Look for signals in everyday behavior, because that is where character hides. Notice how someone responds when things go wrong. Do they take ownership or search for scapegoats? Observe how they treat those who cannot benefit them, the waiter, the janitor, the intern, because this reveals how they handle power and status. Pay attention to what topics dominate their conversations: ideas, opportunities, learning, or people, rumors, and grievances. Listen to their language. Do they use words of agency, I can, I will, or words of helplessness and resentment? These cues matter because they will shape your own internal dialogue. If you hear discouragement every day, courage becomes harder to sustain. If you are constantly around cynicism, optimism starts to feel naive. Patterns in others eventually become habits in you. Choosing company also involves choosing balance. A strong circle is not a single type of person, it is a constellation of influences that challenge, comfort, and stretch you in different directions. Friends who understand your history and accept your vulnerabilities are essential for stability. Mentors who have walked further in life provide wisdom and perspective, preventing you from repeating common mistakes. Peers who share your ambitions push you to compete with your best self. Diverse voices from different backgrounds keep you from narrowing into a single, fragile worldview. If all your company mirrors you, you will stagnate. If all your company challenges you, you will burn out. The art lies in cultivating a mix of relationships that nurture growth without eroding your sense of belonging. Sometimes the hardest part of choosing company is letting go of the wrong kind. Loyalty, nostalgia, or fear of conflict can keep us tied to relationships that drain us or distort us. But holding on to destructive company is costly. It consumes mental bandwidth, distorts self-image, and limits opportunity. Letting go does not always require confrontation or hostility. It can be as simple as shifting proximity, seeing them less often, creating firm boundaries, and investing that reclaimed time in healthier relationships. Each choice to step away from toxic influence is also a choice to move closer to an environment that supports who you want to become. There is another dimension people forget: you are also someone else's company. While you are filtering influences, others are filtering you. The qualities you admire, honesty, resilience, empathy, curiosity, must live in you if you want to attract them. If you crave trustworthy people, practice being trustworthy. If you value ambition, work on your own goals with discipline. This is not only fair, it is strategic, because relationships tend to mirror energy. Like attracts like. You rarely find exceptional company without becoming exceptional company yourself. In the end, this principle is less about avoiding bad people and more about aligning your social environment with your aspirations. The easiest way to predict your future is to examine your present company, because they will influence how you think, what you prioritize, and what you believe is possible. We become, almost unconsciously, the average of the people we spend the most time with, not just in income or lifestyle, but in attitude, vocabulary, habits, and moral standards. That is why choosing your company is not a casual preference, it is a life-defining act. Every hour you spend with someone is a small investment in the person you are becoming. Choose with care, because over time, those choices will carve out the shape of your character and the trajectory of your life. Don't gossip. Avoiding gossip is not just about refraining from idle chatter, it is about protecting integrity, yours and others, and cultivating trust in every interaction. Gossip may seem harmless or even entertaining, a way to bond over shared curiosity or judgment, but beneath its surface it corrodes relationships, damages reputations, and distorts reality. At its core, gossip thrives on the absence of the subject. It is a conversation about someone who is not present to clarify, defend, or provide context. This absence makes gossip inherently unbalanced and often unfair. When you participate in it, you send an implicit message: if I am willing to speak this way about them, I may also speak this way about you when you are not here. Over time, this message creates an atmosphere of distrust, where people smile in public and wonder in private what is being said behind closed doors. Gossip also reflects a failure of courage and clarity. If you have a concern about someone, the honest path is to address it directly with that person or, if necessary, with someone who can help resolve the issue. Gossip takes the opposite route. It vents emotion without responsibility, trading the hard work of dialogue for the cheap relief of complaint. This may feel satisfying in the moment, but it resolves nothing and often amplifies the problem by spreading half-truths or assumptions. Even positive gossip, sharing flattering stories without permission, can backfire, because it removes the individual's right to control their own narrative. And in professional settings, gossip can quietly sabotage careers, erode team cohesion, and destroy cultures of transparency. There is also an ethical dimension. When you speak about someone without their knowledge, especially in a way that could alter how others perceive them, you take power over their reputation. That power carries moral responsibility. Words, once spoken, cannot be fully retrieved. They ripple outward, influencing decisions and attitudes in ways you may never see. Many conflicts that escalate into permanent rifts begin with small acts of careless talk. A single comment, repeated and embellished, can become a distorted story that overshadows truth. The damage often spreads beyond the person discussed. It infects the character of the speaker, too. Habitual gossipers become associated with drama, pettiness, and disloyalty, even among those who indulge them. People may laugh at the jokes, but they rarely trust the joker. Why, then, do people gossip? Often it springs from insecurity, boredom, or the need to feel connected. Sharing secrets creates a temporary sense of intimacy, as if belonging depends on knowing what others do not. But this intimacy is shallow because it is based on exclusion rather than inclusion, on talking about others rather than with them. Real connection does not require tearing someone down or dissecting their private choices. It thrives on shared experiences, empathy, and honest conversation. When you reject gossip, you signal that your relationships rest on stronger foundations than mutual disparagement. Protecting yourself from gossip requires awareness and boundaries. When someone begins to speak ill of another, you have choices: change the subject, steer the conversation toward solutions, or, if necessary, disengage politely. If you hold a position of influence, make it clear that gossip is not a norm you tolerate, because culture flows from what leaders allow. In friendships, model a different kind of loyalty, defend the absent, or at least refuse to harm them. This does not mean suppressing truth or avoiding accountability. There are legitimate contexts for discussing someone else, performance reviews, interventions, necessary disclosures, but these should be constructive, purposeful, and ideally transparent to the person involved. Eliminating gossip from your habits also means examining the subtler forms: sarcastic remarks about someone's quirks, speculation about their motives, even veiled compliments that carry a sting. These micro-habits feel small but accumulate, shaping your identity as someone who feeds on judgment rather than generosity. Replace them with curiosity and compassion. If you hear a rumor, ask, "Is this my business? Is this verified? Would I say this if the person were here? Would I want it said about me?" Most gossip fails this test instantly. The benefits of rejecting gossip are profound. You become a person others trust with confidence, a reputation that opens doors and deepens bonds. You free your mind from the mental clutter of rumors and comparisons. You contribute to environments, whether at work, home, or in social circles, where people feel safe to be authentic. Most importantly, you maintain integrity, the alignment between what you say in private and what you would own in public. Integrity is the quiet architecture of character. Every time you refuse gossip, you strengthen it. Life offers endless opportunities to speak behind backs. The restraint to refrain is rare. But that restraint is power, the power to elevate conversations, protect dignity, and focus on what truly matters. Talking about ideas, solutions, and aspirations builds bridges. Talking about people without their presence builds walls. When you choose the former, you not only safeguard others' reputations, you safeguard your own. Don't make decisions in anger. Anger is a fast-burning fuel. It surges to protect you, to mark a boundary, to demand that something unfair be corrected. As a signal, it is invaluable. As a driver of decisions, it is reckless. The very chemistry that prepares your body to fight or flee also narrows your attention, collapses your time horizon, and pushes you toward simple, absolute stories, villain and victim, all or nothing, now or never. In that state you are excellent at reacting and terrible at choosing. Not making decisions in anger is therefore a commitment to let the signal be heard while refusing to hand it the wheel. What anger does to thinking is subtle and predictable. It speeds up inference and slows down doubt. It trades nuance for certainty and curiosity for judgment. You begin to interpret neutral details as further proof of offense, to attribute motives you cannot actually know, and to grasp at irreversible actions because they promise relief. You are more likely to escalate, quitting, breaking off, sending the scathing message, and less likely to ask the only helpful questions: what exactly happened? What do I want to be true a week from now? What decision would still make sense when this heat has cooled? The problem is not that anger is irrational, it is exquisitely rational for immediate defense, but that most decisions with lasting consequences are not improved by a mindset optimized for combat. Refusing to decide in anger does not mean suppressing or spiritualizing away what you feel. It means separating the experience from the act. Let anger do its rightful work, identify a threat, highlight a violated value, flood you with energy to respond. Then give your nervous system room to settle so you can respond with aim instead of spasm. This usually requires time and movement. Step away from the trigger, breathe slowly until your exhale is longer than your inhale, put your body to work in a way that bleeds off adrenaline, walk, stretch, wash dishes. Name the emotion plainly: I am angry, I feel disrespected. Naming turns raw heat into information. Only then start thinking about choices. A practical rule is to match the speed of the decision to the reversibility of its consequences. In anger, allow yourself only reversible actions: save the draft, step outside, request time, reschedule the meeting, log the incident, set a boundary for the moment: I need to pause this conversation. Delay anything irreversible until you have slept, spoken to a trusted confidant, or revisited the facts in writing. Another useful guardrail is the time test. Would this decision still feel wise in 24 hours, after a meal, or in a different room? If an action feels urgent only in the heat, it's not a decision, it's a discharge. Turning anger into a teacher requires translating the feeling into a clear statement of values and boundaries. Ask, what value of mine was stepped on? Fairness, respect, safety, honesty. What pattern, not just this incident, needs addressing? What outcome do I actually want? When you know the value, you can design a response that protects it without collateral damage. That might mean a precise conversation rather than a character indictment, a rewritten process rather than a public shaming, a tightened boundary rather than a scorched earth exit. The lesson hides in the specifics. What were the early warning signs you ignored, the assumptions you made too quickly, the permissions you gave that you now regret. Write them down. Decide how you'll act next time before the next time arrives. Because anger compresses nuance, it helps to borrow another mind while deciding. A short conversation with a level-headed friend, mentor, or colleague can widen the frame. Are you seeing this clearly? What alternatives are you missing? What are the second-order effects of doing what you want to do right now? Choose someone who will honor your feelings without feeding your fire. If no one is available, play the role yourself. Imagine advising a friend you care about who is in your exact situation. What would you counsel them to do today, tomorrow, and never? Language also matters. In anger we reach for absolute words, always, never. Everyone, no one, which paint us into corners. Replace them with concrete descriptions, times, places, actions. In our 2 p.m. meeting you interrupted me 3 times after I asked to finish my point, is a platform for change. You never respect me, is an accelerant. Use requests, not just complaints. I want us to agree that when one of us is presenting, the other takes notes and waits to respond. This moves your energy from punishment to problem solving, which is where real change happens. Some situations will tempt you to confuse decisive with impulsive. The difference is preparation. Decisive action taken from a calm state, calling out abuse, ending a harmful relationship, reporting misconduct, is not the same as an angry lunge. You can honor your anger by letting it set the agenda, this must change, while letting your cooler mind choose the method and the moment. Build if-then rules in advance so you are not improvising under heat. If a client insults my staff, I will end the meeting and follow up in writing. If a partner breaks an agreed boundary twice, I will pause the relationship for 30 days and propose conditions for repair. Pre-commitment frees you from both explosive reactions and endless waffling. It is equally important to notice when anger is intensified by basic strain, hunger, exhaustion, loneliness, accumulated stress. These states shrink patience and inflate threat perception. Before you decide anything consequential, restore your baseline, eat, hydrate, sleep, move, talk to someone who sees you. Let the body downshift so the mind can widen. Many urgent choices evaporate once your physiology is no longer screaming. In work and leadership, the rule protects more than your reputation, it protects your judgment. Angry firings, hostile emails, public dressings down feel powerful and often read as weakness later, evidence that you cannot hold tension without lashing out. Leaders who can acknowledge anger, pause, and then act with proportion build cultures where issues are addressed early and people are safe enough to tell the truth. Parents and partners who postpone decisions until they are calm teach those around them that conflict can be navigated without harm. There will be times when anger is righteous, when harm is real and delay is costly. Even then, make a micropause. Check your target, the behavior, not the person's entire identity, your aim, the change you want, and your collateral, who else this will affect. Speak firmly, act promptly, and keep consequences proportionate to the offense. Anger can power your voice, it should not script your sentence. The discipline of not deciding in anger is really the discipline of protecting your future from your most heated moment. It treats anger as an alarm you respect, not a commander you obey. It asks you to be the kind of person who can feel deeply and still choose wisely. Over time, this practice builds a trustworthy life, fewer apologies for overreactions, fewer burned bridges, more decisions that look good not only in the mirror of the moment but in the daylight of the days that follow. Don't procrastinate on the important. Procrastinating on the important is less a character flaw than a predictable human pattern, but it is also one of the most costly habits you can sustain, because the things you postpone tend to be the very things that shape your future. The important tasks are usually important precisely because they are consequential, ambiguous, or emotionally charged. Writing the presentation that will decide a promotion, saying the hard thing to a loved one, starting the health regimen that prevents later disease, preparing tax documents, launching a business, or filing for help when your mental health is fraying. They often require sustained attention, expose you to risk of failure, rejection, or discomfort, or demand long lead time. Procrastination hides behind busyness, distraction, perfectionism, decision fatigue, fear, and vague goals. Its immediate payoff is relief from the discomfort of beginning, but the long-term cost is lost opportunity, compounded stress, damaged relationships, and a slow attrition of confidence. At root, procrastination is an emotional regulation problem disguised as a time management problem. When a task feels threatening, because it might reveal a weakness, require vulnerability, or simply feels massive, your brain prioritizes mood management over long-term outcomes. The short-term strategy works: you reduce anxiety now. The tragedy is that the avoidance increases anxiety later, and the compound effect of repeating that pattern is a chronic life of crisis management and regret. Understanding that dynamic changes how you fix the problem. You don't only need better calendars and to-do lists, though they help. You need strategies to manage the fear, the overwhelm, and the friction that keep you from starting. Start by clarifying what important actually means for you. Importance is not the loudest or most urgent thing in your inbox. It's the activity that advances your long-term values and goals. Take time to define your non-negotiables: family, health, work milestones, creative projects, and translate them into measurable outcomes. If your value is health, an important outcome might be lose 6 kilograms in 6 months through a structured exercise and meal plan. If your value is career growth, an outcome might be submit 2 proposals this quarter. Converting vague aspirations into concrete, time-bound outcomes makes them actionable and easier to prioritize against the noise. Once you know what matters, reduce psychological friction. Break large, intimidating projects into the smallest possible starting moves. The trick is to make the first step so small that resistance can't justify avoidance. Open the document, write 1 sentence, set a 10-minute timer to read 1 article, or sketch an outline on a napkin. This principle of micro-action, tiny, non-threatening beginning steps, turns initiation from a heroic act into a trivial habit. Use time boxing. Dedicate a fixed block, 20 to 50 minutes, to the small task and commit to stopping when the timer rings. Often starting is the hardest part. Once momentum begins, the work becomes easier. Pair micro-actions with implementation intentions, exactive then plans that remove the guesswork of willpower. Don't say, "I'll exercise more." Say, "If it is 7 a.m. on weekdays, then I will do 20 minutes of bodyweight exercises in the living room." This specificity short-circuits the procrastination conversation your brain tries to start each morning. Combine that with environment design. Make the desired behavior easy and the undesired behavior hard. Leave workout clothes by the bed, block distracting websites during focus hours, keep the required forms on your desk instead of buried in a folder, or put your phone in another room. Small changes to the physical and digital context often produce outsized effects. Accountability is a powerful anti-procrastination tool. Public commitments, telling a friend, posting a pledge, or scheduling the task on your calendar as a non-cancelable event, raise the social cost of delay and recruit external pressure in your favor. A partner who texts at 9 o'clock to check whether you started your important work, or a paid mentor who expects deliverables, creates leverage that private intention often lacks. If you prefer private systems, use commitment devices, calendar blocks that are effectively non-negotiable, prepayment for coaching, or an app that charges you money if you miss a promised task and sends it to someone you choose. Manage perfectionism directly. A common reason people defer important tasks is the demand for perfect output. Replace perfection with first good draft or prototype as the objective. Set a rule like, "I will finish a workable draft in 2 sittings," or "I will ship a minimum viable version and iterate." Time-boxed practice combats perfectionism because it privileges completion over endless polish. Celebrate iteration. The point of early work is feedback and learning, not flawless presentation. Reappraise discomfort as information rather than evidence of incapacity. When you feel avoidance or dread, pause and label the emotion. I'm anxious, I'm bored, I'm afraid of failing. Naming reduces the emotion's power and creates a window for curiosity. What specifically am I afraid of? Is the fear realistic or a projection? Often you'll discover the real barrier: lack of clarity, fear of outcome, resource gap, and then you can design a tactical fix, ask for guidance, split the task into smaller steps, or schedule a brief rehearsal. Use concrete techniques to manage attention: single tasking during focus blocks, the Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes work, 5 minutes break, batching similar tasks, and limiting decisions by presetting routines. Your calendar is a commitment device. Treat scheduled work like an appointment with yourself and protect it by declining non-essential meetings during those blocks. Keep a short daily list of 3 most important tasks, MITs, and make completing at least one of them a daily rule. This creates consistent forward progress on consequential goals rather than the illusion of productivity from low-impact busy work. Measure leading indicators, not just outcomes. For long-term goals, outcome metrics, promotion, manuscript finished, lag and are demotivating. Instead, track leading metrics you can control: hours written per week, calls scheduled, meals prepped, or workouts completed. These keep you connected to progress and reduce the temptation to delay because the final result feels distant. Recognize the role of energy and basic needs. You will procrastinate more when you are tired, hungry, ill, or stressed. Triage physiological needs first: sleep, nutrition, movement, because your executive function works better when the body is supported. Schedule cognitively demanding important work when you know your energy is highest, and use lower energy times for routine or administrative tasks. When you fall into procrastination, respond strategically rather than righteously. Shame and self-flagellation feel motivating in the short term but worsen avoidance. Instead, perform a quick triage: forgive yourself, identify why you delayed, unclear steps, fear, misalignment, and set one tiny step to start now. Convert the regret into a corrective plan: what will you do differently tomorrow? Reviewing patterns weekly helps you spot recurring traps and redesign workflows or rules before procrastination becomes a habit again. There are also higher-order moves: create deadlines and stakes. Self-imposed, artificial deadlines with real consequences, like agreeing to present a draft to peers on a fixed date, create urgency where natural urgency is absent. Use temptation bundling to make the unpleasant palatable. Allow yourself to listen to a favorite podcast only while you do the important but boring task. Use visible progress cues, habit trackers, a whiteboard, or a running tally to make otherwise invisible work feel tangible and rewarding. Finally, distinguish procrastination from strategic delay. Sometimes waiting is wise. You delay signing a contract until more information arrives, or you let an idea incubate for clarity. The difference is intention and timeline. Strategic delay is deliberate and has a plan. Procrastination is avoidance masquerading as strategy. Test your delay against criteria. Is there a clear reason to wait? What will happen if you wait? When will you revisit the decision? If you can't answer, you are probably procrastinating. Don't underestimate the moral and relational cost. Postponing important conversations strains trust. Delaying health care can cost you health. Postponing financial planning compounds risk. The emotional toll, stress, sleeplessness, the constant low hum of unfinished business, shrinks the margin for joy. Conversely, consistently doing the important thing, even imperfectly, builds momentum, confidence, and a life that aligns with your values. Over time, the habit compounds. Small daily fidelity to what matters becomes the architecture of a life that feels intentional rather than accidental. In the end, Not procrastinating on the important is both a practical skill and a moral discipline. It asks you to redesign your environment, manage emotion, set concrete rituals, and choose incremental action over the illusion of readiness. It asks you to be kind to yourself when you fail and ruthless in eliminating friction that enables delay. Do the smallest, simplest thing you can right now toward what matters. That one step is often the canyon crossing motion. Once taken, the rest becomes possible. Embrace discomfort. To embrace discomfort is to reorient your relationship with the unpleasant, the awkward, and the unknown so that instead of recoiling you lean in with purpose. It is not a vow to suffer for its own sake, nor is it a call to ignore danger or pain. It is the deliberate decision to use short-term unease as fuel for long-term growth. Human beings are wired to avoid pain and seek comfort. This bias kept us alive for millennia, but the very comforts that protect us in the moment can calcify into the habits and circumstances that stunt us over years. Embracing discomfort means recognizing when avoidance is protecting your ego or your convenience rather than your well-being, and choosing a different, harder route precisely because the harder route produces change. Discomfort shows up in many forms: the tight breath before you speak up in a meeting, the trembling hands when you lift heavier at the gym, the queasy stomach when you ask for what you're worth, the ache of sitting with grief instead of distracting yourself. Each of these is an information signal. The body's alarm, fear, embarrassment, fatigue, does not necessarily mean stop, often it means pay attention. Learning to read the difference between a protective alarm and a growth signal is the first skill of this practice. A growth signal tends to be temporary, bounded, and proportional to a meaningful goal. A true alarm, severe pain, imminent danger, or chronic depletion, requires withdrawal and care. Embracing discomfort is about stepping into the former and respecting the latter. There is a simple physiology and psychology behind why this works. Skills are grown through repeated challenge, muscles with micro-tears rebuild stronger, synapses rewire when pushed outside old patterns, habits form when you practice new behaviors despite resistance. Emotionally, tolerating the sting of vulnerability, saying the hard thing, owning the mistake, asking for help, trains your nervous system to accept uncertainty and restores agency. Socially, the willingness to risk awkwardness announces authenticity and invites trust. People are drawn to those who can weather hard conversations instead of dodging them. In short, the repeated, intentional acceptance of manageable discomfort produces competence, confidence, and depth. Practically, embracing discomfort is a discipline you can build with method and kindness toward yourself. Start by cataloging what you avoid and why. Keep a short, avoidance log for a week and note situations that trigger resistance. Choose one clear, specific discomfort you want to address: a 5-minute phone call you've been putting off, a public speaking practice, a difficult conversation, and break it into the smallest actionable piece. Use the principle of progressive overload. If the full task feels impossible, cut it down to a fraction: 1 minute, 1 sentence, 1 repetition, and do that consistently until the resistance eases. Track small wins. Momentum is contagious. Pair the behavior with a tiny ritual that signals commitment. Mark a calendar, text a friend, set a timer. Over time, gradually increase the dose so your tolerance and skill grow together. Reframing is also essential. The internal narrative inside the discomfort, the story you tell yourself, shapes whether you run or stay. Instead of thinking, "I'm terrible at this," reframe to, "This is uncomfortable because I'm learning." Discomfort is evidence of change. Name the physical sensations when they arise: "My chest is tight, my hands are cold." Naming reduces their power because it turns raw fear into data. Use curiosity as your tool. Ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" and "What would happen if I tried once more?" Pair curiosity with compassion. Don't berate yourself for the difficulty. Small doses of self-kindness lubricate stubborn change. There are also tactical practices that make discomfort manageable. Time boxing is powerful. Commit to doing the feared activity for a fixed, limited period, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then reevaluate. If you're afraid of rejection, try a numbers game. Send 3 polite requests this week and treat results as information, not as identity. Use role play or low-stakes rehearsal. Practice the conversation with a friend, or in front of a mirror, to desensitize the fear. Build accountability into the process, public commitments or a partner who will check and keep you honest. Create safe failure environments, workshops, improv groups, or mentorship circles where mistakes are expected and learning is explicit. Over time, the ratio of attempts to catastrophes will shift dramatically in your favor. At the same time, cultivate discernment. Embracing discomfort is not a license to tolerate abuse, ignore chronic stress, or push your body past safe limits. There's a crucial difference between stretch and injury. If a situation repeatedly erodes your sense of self, contradicts your values, or causes sustained harm, leaning in is not courage, it's self-sabotage. Likewise, if anxiety or panic is severe and persistent, seek professional support rather than trying to tough it out alone. The rule is, approach discomfort that increases agency, capacity, or meaning, withdraw from pain that depletes dignity, health, or safety. The moral courage to face discomfort also reshapes relationships and leadership. People who habitually accept tough feedback, apologize when wrong, or initiate hard conversations create cultures where problems are surfaced early, trust deepens, and collective resilience strengthens. Leaders who model this posture, admitting uncertainty, taking visible risks, and admitting mistakes, invite the same behavior from others. Socially, the willingness to be the first to feel awkward often breaks stalemate. Someone has to ask the question, make the proposal, or apologize first. Those acts are seldom comfortable, but they are catalytic. Sustaining this practice over a lifetime requires ritual and reflection. Keep a growth log, short entries about attempts, what you felt, and what you learned. Celebrate micro-victories, they are the mortar of confidence. Schedule regular discomfort days, or mini-retreats where you deliberately try new things, learn a language for an hour, cold email a stranger, take a different route home. Revisit your values periodically and ask whether your comforts and routines are aligned with them. When you see complacency creeping in, a comfortable job that numbs you, social patterns that stop stretching you, use that as a signal to pick a new, intentional discomfort. In the end, embracing discomfort changes not only what you can do but who you are. The person who habitually leans into the hard thing becomes someone who trusts their own ability to handle uncertainty. They become resilient by experience rather than by abstract hope. Discomfort stops feeling like only a threat and begins to look like a compass pointing toward areas that matter. You won't eliminate fear or pain, but you will widen the range of what you can tolerate and transform more of life's sharp edges into opportunities to become larger, kinder, and truer to yourself. Forgive, but don't forget the lesson. To forgive but not forget the lesson is an orientation toward life that preserves your peace without surrendering your hard-earned wisdom. Forgiveness, in its healthiest form, is a deliberate decision to stop carrying the charge of resentment as a daily burden. It does not require erasing what happened, pretending the harm was trivial, or immediately restoring trust. Forgetting the lesson would be to leave the same hole open and expect different results. The two, forgiveness and remembering, serve different purposes. Forgiveness frees you from corrosive emotion, remembering protects you from repeating avoidable harm. Holding both intentionally is an act of emotional maturity. You clear space in your heart while you keep a map of the terrain so you don't walk into the same trap twice. Forgiveness begins with naming. You must first acknowledge clearly what happened and how it affected you without minimizing or inflating it. That means saying the facts to yourself: what was done, who did it, what the consequences were, and how it felt. This factual inventory is not rumination, it is documentation. It creates a firm basis for the rest of the process. Once the facts are on the table, allow the emotional experience to be present without acting it out. Name the emotions: anger, humiliation, grief, betrayal, so they become objects you can attend to rather than forces that drive your behavior. This simple act of labeling reduces the reactivity of emotions and creates psychological distance, which is necessary for any genuine forgiveness. Next comes the decision to release the emotional hold. Forgiveness is active and voluntary. You decide, for reasons you choose, that you will not let this injury define your internal weather. Often that decision is motivated by compassion, for the other or for yourself, by pragmatism, you need your energy for other things, or by moral clarity, you refuse to be consumed by bitterness. It helps to be explicit. Say to yourself, either silently or aloud, I choose not to carry this anger as my daily companion. That declaration is not magic, but it signals a commitment you can return to when old feelings flare. Pair the decision with rituals that externalize it: writing an unsent letter, burning a symbolic paper, or a quiet meditation in which you imagine setting the grievance down. Rituals matter because abstract choices are easier to forget than acts. While you release the emotional hold, you must also create a practical memory of what happened, a lesson file that is crisp, unemotional, and action-oriented. Record the concrete pattern you observed, not the story that makes you the tragic hero. For example, instead of a narrative like, "He always betrays me because he is selfish," write, pattern: X made a promise in situations A and B and did not follow through. Warning signs included Y and Z. Consequence was loss of trust in project leadership. The purpose of this file is to convert feeling into information you can use. Keep it short and factual. Emotions belong in your processing work, but lessons belong in the decision-making toolbox. Translate that lesson into specific boundary rules or if-then plans that guide future behavior. Vague resolutions, "I'll be more careful," are fragile. Precise rules endure. An if-then plan might read: if a collaborator misses 2 agreed deadlines without communication, escalate to my manager and require status updates before adding more work. Or in a personal relationship, if apologies are not followed by at least 3 concrete acts of repair over 90 days, I will pause deeper intimacy until consistent change occurs. These rules protect you from repeating the same vulnerability while leaving space for the other's growth. They convert memory into predictable, repeatable action. Forgiveness and remembering also differ in their role toward the other person. Forgiveness can happen privately and need not coincide with reconciliation. You can forgive someone to free yourself even while holding them accountable, maintaining distance, or ending the relationship. Reconciliation, rebuilding trust, requires additional work from the other party. Acknowledgement of harm, genuine apology, concrete reparative actions, and time-bound evidence of behavioral change. A useful checklist for whether reconciliation is possible includes: did they acknowledge the harm without minimizing it? Did they accept responsibility without deflecting? Have they taken steps to repair, not just promise to? And does their behavior consistently match their words over time? Forgiving too quickly without these signals risks enabling repeat harm. Waiting for evidence before reconnecting protects both your boundaries and the potential for a healthier relationship later. Cognitive tools make holding both forgiveness and lesson easier. Practice reappraisal. Reinterpret the event in a way that reduces its emotional sting without excusing the behavior. That might mean recognizing external pressures that influence the other person, useful for empathy but not for absolution, or reframing the incident as a learning point in your life's curriculum. Use memory cues that are neutral rather than toxic. Store lessons in a private journal, a secure notes app, or a boundary handbook rather than replaying the grievance repeatedly in your head. This prevents rumination while keeping the procedural memory accessible. Do not confuse remembering with bitterness. Memory should be functional. It guides decisions, triggers boundaries, and informs whom you trust with what. Bitterness is a repetitive pastime of the mind that replays the hurt to feel righteous. It serves no future-building purpose. When you find yourself rehearsing old indignities for their own sake, use the techniques of naming and reappraisal to stop the loop. then return to the factual lesson if action is required. If the memory remains intolerably vivid and intrusive, consider therapeutic support. Professional tools can convert distressing memories into less reactive narratives. Self-forgiveness belongs here too. Often we hold ourselves to an impossible standard for past mistakes, staying resentful at our own failures or allowing them to define us. Forgive yourself with the same structure, acknowledge the fact pattern, name the harm, decide to release the ongoing emotional punishment, and translate the lesson into practical rules to avoid repeating the error. This completes a humane loop in which learning replaces self-flagellation. There are limits and clarifications worth insisting on. Forgiveness does not mean tolerating ongoing abuse or repeatedly exposing yourself to clear patterns of harm under the guise of giving people a chance. It also does not require public reconciliation nor absolution of legal or financial responsibility. The choice to forgive is yours for psychological health, but it does not erase the need for accountability, justice, or safety measures. Keep your boundaries firm and your safety prioritized. Finally, recognize the long arc. Forgiveness and memory both change over time. As people demonstrate consistent change, your lessons should be updated. The memory file is not an immutable indictment but a living document that can be revised with new evidence. Conversely, a single apology should not automatically erase a long pattern. Maintain an attitude of prudent openness. Be willing to revise judgments based on reliable new behavior, but never at the cost of your baseline dignity and safety. Forgive to unchain your heart, remember to arm your future. When done well, these twin practices let you move through the world with both softness and wisdom, able to be generous without being gullible, able to trust again without erasing the education pain gave you. Invest in relationships. To invest in relationships is to understand that the quality of your life is inseparable from the quality of the connections you nurture, and that these connections do not thrive by accident. They require attention, intention, and repeated acts of care. Relationships, whether friendships, family ties, partnerships, or professional networks, are living systems, not static possessions. Like any living thing, they grow stronger when fed with time, trust, and empathy, and they wither when left unattended or treated as transactional. To invest in relationships is to accept that they carry both cost and reward, the cost being your effort, patience, and vulnerability, the reward being support, joy, resilience, and meaning that cannot be bought or manufactured in moments of crisis. Investment begins with time. Time is the most honest currency because you cannot counterfeit it or recover it once spent. A relationship deepens not from grand gestures alone but from small, consistent deposits, shared meals, check-in messages, quiet conversations, laughter in ordinary spaces. These moments seem trivial in isolation, but they accumulate into a reservoir of trust and warmth that sustains the connection when life turns hard. When you neglect these deposits, because you are too busy, too distracted, or assume the bond will maintain itself, you create an overdraft that becomes painfully visible when you need support and find only distance. Attention is the second form of investment. In a distracted age, undivided attention is rare and therefore precious. To invest attention is to listen without planning your reply, to notice what is unsaid, to remember details that matter to the other person, and to respond in ways that show you care. Attention signals respect. It says, "You matter enough for me to pause the noise of the world." Without it, even time together can feel hollow, like two bodies in proximity but minds elsewhere. The simplest rituals, a phone put face down during dinner, a follow-up text about something mentioned casually, a question that shows you were listening, turn ordinary exchanges into anchors of belonging. Emotional generosity is another form of investment. This means offering understanding when it would be easier to judge, patience when it would be easier to rush, forgiveness when it would be easier to hold a grudge. Relationships strain not only when major conflicts occur but when small resentments accumulate unchecked. Investing here means addressing tension early, with honesty and care, rather than letting silence harden into distance. It means showing up for others in their mess, not just their highlight reel, and allowing them to do the same for you. Vulnerability, the willingness to share fears, doubts, and unpolished truths, is not a withdrawal but a deposit, because it invites intimacy and signals trust. Practical support is also part of the equation. Being reliable, keeping promises, showing up on time, following through, builds structural trust, the sense that this person is a steady presence rather than a fair-weather ally. Offering help without keeping score strengthens bonds. Reciprocity in healthy relationships is natural, not transactional, but it begins with a posture of giving rather than calculating. Sometimes investment is as tangible as running an errand for a friend who is overwhelmed, lending expertise without charging, or rearranging your schedule for someone else's milestone event. These acts say, "You are part of my priorities," and over time they create a lattice of mutual care that neither distance nor hardship can easily break. To invest wisely, you must also discern. Not every connection deserves equal allocation of your time and energy. Some relationships are extractive, fueled by entitlement or manipulation, and continuing to pour into them is like watering a field of stones. Investment should be generous but not indiscriminate. It requires boundaries. Healthy relationships allow for mutual respect, where both parties contribute to the well-being of the bond, even if the contributions are asymmetrical at times. The principle is balance over time, not perfect symmetry in every instance. Part of investing well is auditing your relational portfolio, which bonds nourish you as you nourish them, which require renegotiation, which should be gracefully released so that energy can flow where growth is possible. A common mistake is waiting for a crisis to realize the value of connection. People often neglect friendships in pursuit of career or convenience, assuming they can revive them when needed, only to find that trust cannot be summoned on demand. True investment is proactive. Schedule time for people as you would for deadlines. Celebrate their victories without envy, grieve their losses without discomfort, and mark their ordinary days with small acknowledgments that say, "I see you." These gestures compound. When life delivers inevitable blows, illness, loss, uncertainty, your prior investments become a safety net, woven from countless threads of presence and care. Technology complicates but can also amplify relational investment. A quick message, a voice note, a shared photo keeps you tethered across geography, but only if used as a supplement, not a substitute, for embodied connection. Digital communication without depth is like feeding relationships with sugar. It creates the illusion of fullness without substance. Use tools deliberately, not to perform connection, but to sustain it between richer encounters. Even a short text, "Thinking of you, how did that meeting go?" can be a micro-investment that pays dividends in trust. The returns on these investments are profound but not always immediate. Deep relationships provide not only companionship but perspective, resilience, and a mirror that reflects you back to yourself in honest but compassionate ways. They buffer stress, amplify joy, and remind you of your continuity when life fractures your sense of self. They outlast careers, possessions, and status. They are the infrastructure of meaning in a world obsessed with performance metrics that vanish when the lights go out. To invest in relationships is to make a conscious trade, time and energy now for connection and belonging later. It is a refusal to live as if efficiency and independence were the highest goods. It acknowledges a truth that ambition often obscures, that at the end of striving, what sustains us is not what we have but who we have, and who has us. Each call returned, each honest conversation, each act of presence is a seed. Plant them not for applause or leverage but because a well-tended garden of human bonds is the most enduring form of wealth you can ever own. Keep your word. Keeping your word is one of the foundational acts that shape both your character and your life circumstances. At first glance, it may seem simple, a matter of honesty or reliability, but in reality, it reflects the integrity with which you engage the world and the respect you have for both yourself and others. Every promise, whether large or small, spoken or implied, carries weight because it is a contract of trust. To keep your word is to align your actions with your commitments, to ensure that your intentions are not merely gestures but forces that translate into tangible follow-through. Failing to do so erodes trust, not just in the eyes of others but within yourself, because repeated unkept promises quietly signal that your own commitments are negotiable, disposable, or secondary to convenience. Keeping your word begins with understanding the commitments you make and the significance of each. Words spoken casually, "I'll call you tomorrow," "I'll handle that task," "I'll be there," often carry consequences that ripple far beyond the moment. For the person receiving your commitment, it communicates reliability, respect, and predictability. For you, it is a reflection of self-discipline and moral consistency. Each promise you fulfill reinforces the internal belief that you can act with purpose and that your decisions matter. Conversely, every promise broken, even in small ways, chips away at that internal framework, creating doubt in your own judgment and eroding the stability of relationships and collaborative efforts. The first aspect of keeping your word is clarity. Do not commit without full awareness of your capacity, resources, and intentions. Overpromising is often a product of short-term desire to please or fear of confrontation, but it sets the stage for failure. It is far better to negotiate the terms of a commitment up front, clarify timelines, and express limitations than to make an empty pledge. Honest assessment before committing is not avoidance, it is the proactive alignment of capability with responsibility. When you say yes, do so knowing the realistic demands it entails. Equally important is consistency in follow-through. Keeping your word requires planning, attention, and a willingness to prioritize action over convenience. It demands that you structure your life in a way that allows commitments to be met, even when obstacles emerge. When unexpected challenges arise, communication is crucial, alerting the relevant parties, explaining transparently, and proposing alternative solutions preserves trust even if circumstances threaten the original plan. Integrity does not require perfection, it requires responsiveness and responsibility. The measure of reliability is how one manages difficulties while honoring commitments, not merely the ease of fulfilling them under ideal conditions. Keeping your word also functions as a signal in social and professional contexts. People quickly learn who can be counted on and who cannot. Reliability amplifies influence and credibility. Colleagues seek your input, friends lean on your support, collaborators prioritize you in projects because they trust that promises are binding. Conversely, broken commitments invite scrutiny, erode reputation, and create friction, often in ways disproportionate to the original infraction. Trust, once lost, is difficult to restore, and repeated lapses often become part of your identity in others' eyes, whether fair or not. Your word, therefore, is both an ethical principle and a practical asset. There is also an internal dimension. Keeping your word is a form of self-respect. It signals that your intentions and promises are valuable and not negotiable for trivial reasons. Each commitment honored strengthens your confidence in your ability to manage obligations, make realistic assessments, and align decisions with values. Conversely, failing to honor your word can create cognitive dissonance, a conflict between self-perception and behavior that generates stress, guilt, and erosion of self-trust. A person who regularly keeps their word develops internal coherence, a psychological state in which identity, action, and intention are integrated rather than fragmented. Practical strategies support the habit of keeping your word. Keep a clear record of commitments, both personal and professional, so nothing is forgotten. Break larger promises into actionable steps and schedule them realistically. Review deadlines and responsibilities regularly to anticipate conflicts before they escalate. Learn to say no when necessary, understanding that declining a commitment you cannot honor is a form of integrity. Communicate proactively when adjustments are needed, and document changes to ensure accountability. These behaviors transform the abstract concept of keeping your word into a concrete, reliable practice. Finally, keeping your word is intertwined with long-term character building. It cultivates patience, discipline, and empathy. Honoring promises requires forethought, attention to consequences, and consideration of the other party's needs. Over time, this habit becomes part of your identity, shaping how you approach life, with deliberation, responsibility, and an understanding of the weight of your decisions. The principle is cumulative. Every promise kept reinforces trust and self-respect. Every promise broken, even if small, erodes both. To live in alignment with your word is to live in alignment with yourself, creating a life where actions match values, relationships are fortified, and character is reflected consistently in the choices you make. Keeping your word is not merely etiquette, it is the architecture of trust, the anchor of self-respect, and the invisible infrastructure that allows human relationships and ambitions to function. It is one of the most potent ways to translate intention into reality and integrity into influence. Protect your attention. Protect your attention as if it were the most valuable resource you own, because in modern life it quite literally is. Attention is the gatekeeper for what you learn, what you feel, and what you create, and everything you allow into it shapes the arc of your days. Protecting your attention means doing more than turning off a few notifications. It is a continual practice of setting boundaries, designing environments, training habits, and tending your inner environment so that the things that matter get the quiet, sustained focus they require. When you treat attention like a limited currency, you stop frittering it away on reflexive habits, endless scrolling, shallow multitasking, reactive email, and you invest it in the work, people, and projects that compound over time. The difference between a life lived distracted and one lived deliberately is not an abstract moral judgment. It shows up in the quality of your relationships, the depth of your thinking, and the progress of your goals. Start by noticing where your attention goes and why. Most leaks are habitual rather than intentional. A half hour of news in the morning because that's what fills the silence, 3 open browser tabs that never close, a phone that buzzes at the slightest whim. Audit 1 week of attention as if you were auditing money. Track how many minutes you spend on different kinds of activities and how those minutes feel. You will see patterns, times when you are most alert, the traps that eat whole hours, and the pockets that can be reclaimed. This simple accounting converts vague dissatisfaction into concrete data and gives you leverage to change behavior. Change the environment because willpower is finite and context is powerful. If you want to write, put your writing app in full screen, close extraneous tabs, and remove the pings. If your phone is your weakness, make it inconvenient, leave it in another room, put it in a drawer, or power it down during deep blocks. Use the physical as well as the digital, clear the desk of clutter, keep only the tools needed for the current task within reach, and create sensory cues that signal focus, a particular lamp, a playlist that you only use for work. Design your default so that the desirable choice is the easiest choice. Small frictions against distraction compound into large gains. Schedule attention with the same seriousness you schedule meetings. Block time on your calendar for deep, uninterrupted work and treat those blocks as non-negotiable appointments with yourself. Protect them by setting an agenda for the block, what you will accomplish and how you will know when you are done. When full, divide the day into complementary rhythms. Morning for cognitively heavy tasks if you're a morning person, afternoon for meetings or administrative work, evening for restoration and relational attention. Time boxing and the Pomodoro technique, work for focused intervals, then take short breaks, both exploit human concentration cycles and reduce the temptation to binge-check interruptions. Learn to single task. Multitasking is almost always attention splitting, producing shallow results and attention residue, the lingering cognitive load from switching contexts that reduces subsequent performance. Give one thing your full attention, finish a meaningful chunk, then shift. When you must handle multiple responsibilities, batch them, designate an email hour, a phone call block, and project days rather than sprinkling small fragments of tasks across every waking moment. Batching reduces context switching and magnifies momentum. Guard your inbox and messaging norms. Turn off non-essential notifications and set expectations with people about response times. An auto-reply or a brief message saying, "I check messages at X and Y," saves you from constant reactivity and reduces the moral pressure to answer instantly. Use filters and rules to triage incoming information so that only truly urgent items interrupt you. When you do open email, process it with a clear framework: act, delegate, defer, or delete. Treat messages as tasks to be scheduled, not as demands for immediate attention. Protect your attention in relationships by being present. The most precious gift you can give another person is undivided attention. Eyes up, phone away, curiosity engaged. When you split attention while someone speaks, you signal that they are not worth the full load of your mind. Over time, that erodes intimacy and trust. Conversely, a practice as small as a full 5 minutes of listening without planning a response deepens bonds in ways that no number of present but distracted hours can match. Teach this by example. Model attention in meetings, at meals, and on calls. Cultivate rituals that cue focus and mark transitions. A 5-minute ritual before work, a cup of tea, a breathing exercise, a single page of journaling, tells your nervous system that the period ahead is for concentration. Likewise, rituals that close the workday, a short review, a tidy desk, switching off work devices, help prevent spillover and protect evening attention for family, rest, or reflection. Use brief mindfulness practices to notice when attention wanders, name the distraction and gently redirect without judgment. Over time, these tiny acts of metacognitive control make it easier to return to focus. Defend your attention from attention-hungry industries that are optimized to capture it. Social platforms, news cycles, and entertainment services are designed to pull you into endless consumption because attention equals revenue. You don't need to be ascetic, but you do need a plan. Set limits on passive media, curate your feed so it educates rather than inflames, choose longer-form sources that reward sustained thinking, and schedule deliberate windows for entertainment rather than letting it bleed into every break. Consider content hygiene. Unfollow accounts that provoke negative emotional loops, mute noise that isn't useful, and install app limits where necessary. Protect your internal attention as fiercely as your external one. A restless mind, unresolved tasks, anxiety, and constant planning chatter create internal distractions that are at least as powerful as phones. Use simple externalization techniques. Keep a notebook or a capture app to dump intrusive thoughts, to-dos, and ideas so your mind can stop holding them in the background. Establish a daily planning ritual where those captured items are processed into next actions and scheduled times. Create a worry appointment. If rumination is a problem, 10 minutes a day to think through anxieties, so they don't sabotage your focus all afternoon. Good sleep, regular exercise, and proper nutrition are also non-negotiable. Attention fails when the body is under-resourced. Apply social boundaries with humility and firmness. Saying no protects your attention more than saying yes ever will. You don't need to provide long explanations. A clear, polite refusal or a counteroffer protects your time and focus. Set office hours for colleagues or friends if you need to. Teach people how to reach you in truly urgent situations and cultivate norms that prevent constant interruptions. This isn't selfishness, it's stewardship. By protecting your attention, you are protecting your capacity to contribute, to be generous, and to be present when it matters. Measure and iterate. Track focused hours, the number of interruptions, or how much time you spend in deep work versus shallow busyness. Small metrics, like, I averaged 3 90-minute focus sessions this week, turn abstract goals into concrete leverage. Reflect weekly on what drained your attention and what protected it, then tinker. Attention practice is not once and done, it is a feedback loop where environment design, habit training, and boundaries evolve as your life changes. Finally, balance protection with generosity. Attention is precious, but it is not a fortress that isolates you. Invest some of that preserved attention in the people and projects that deserve it: deep conversations, creative practice, mentorship, and rest. Do not mistake protection for scarcity alone. The aim is to allocate attention deliberately so that you can give it where it matters most. Over time, the discipline of protecting your attention compounds into clearer thinking, better work, stronger relationships, and a calmer interior life. Guard it not as a guilt-driven austerity but as an act of fidelity to what you value, because what you allow into your mind shapes the life you build. Remember that life is finite. To remember that life is finite is to hold close the sobering but liberating truth that our time on this earth is limited. Every life, no matter how long or full, is bounded by a beginning and an end. This awareness is often pushed aside because it is uncomfortable to face the inevitability of death, yet ignoring it does not make it any less real. Instead, forgetting mortality leads to drifting through days as if they are endless, squandering time on trivialities, clinging to grudges, or postponing what matters most. To truly live is to remember that life does not stretch on forever, and that each passing moment is both fragile and unrepeatable. This awareness transforms perspective. When you acknowledge the finite nature of life, you begin to see time as the most precious resource, far more valuable than money, possessions, or status. Money lost can be earned again, possessions broken can be replaced, status gained can be regained. Time, once spent, is gone forever. Each day is a currency that can only be exchanged once, and no one knows how many days remain. This understanding sharpens priorities. You begin to ask not just what do I want to do, but what is worth spending part of my limited life on. Such reflection pushes you toward choices that align with your deepest values rather than distractions. Remembering finitude also deepens appreciation for the present. Small moments, easily overlooked, reveal their richness when seen through the lens of impermanence: the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the laughter of someone you love, the comfort of a meal shared, the quiet of a peaceful evening. These moments are not endless, they are gifts of a particular day, never to be repeated in the same way. Gratitude flourishes when you realize you are not entitled to infinite tomorrows. Every smile, every breath, every connection becomes more vivid and sacred when you know they will one day vanish. This life rule is also a call to courage. Many dreams are deferred under the illusion that there will always be more time to pursue passion, mend broken relationships, travel, create, or express love. But delays accumulate until one day the chance is gone. Remembering mortality strips away the excuse of someday and confronts you with the urgency of now. It encourages boldness, to say the words you have been holding back, to take the risks that align with your heart, to step out of comfort zones in pursuit of what truly matters. Life's brevity is not meant to induce panic but to ignite action. Awareness of finitude also reshapes relationships. When you remember that you and everyone you love are temporary, resentment loses its grip. Anger feels less important than reconciliation, pride less valuable than connection. You become more patient, kinder, more present with others, because you know your time together is not infinite. Goodbyes may sting more, but they also highlight the preciousness of every hello. Even grief, painful as it is, becomes a testimony to the depth of love, a reminder that what ends was worth cherishing while it lasted. Some may fear that remembering life is finite leads only to sadness or nihilism, but the opposite is often true. Mortality gives life its shape. If we were immortal, days would lose their urgency, choices their weight, and experiences their intensity. It is precisely because life ends that it matters how we live. Death is the boundary that makes meaning possible. By remembering this, you gain clarity: what to pursue, what to let go of, what to forgive, what to treasure. Living with the awareness of mortality does not mean obsessing over death. It means using death as a compass to live more intentionally. It means balancing preparation for the future with the enjoyment of today. It means holding your ambitions lightly, knowing that achievements fade, but also pouring yourself fully into what you love, knowing that each act, no matter how small, is part of the one story you get to tell. Ultimately, to remember that life is finite is to live awake. It is to refuse the sleep of routine and the delusion of endless time. It is to stand face to face with the fragility of existence and, rather than despair, to choose presence, courage, and love. When the end does come, as it must, a person who has lived with this awareness will not measure their days by how many they had, but by how fully they were lived. Stay curious about people. To stay curious about people is to choose an orientation toward others that privileges questions over verdicts, context over assumption, and discovery over the comfort of easy stories. Curiosity about people is not idle nosiness, it is a disciplined stance that treats every face as a place where a life has been lived, full of invisible histories, compromises, small triumphs, and private hurts. When you make curiosity your default, you slow the reflex that turns unfamiliar behavior into moral judgment, and you replace that reflex with an inquiry that seeks cause, meaning, and nuance. Instead of concluding they're rude, you wonder what pressures, fears, or conventions led to that curt sentence. Instead of writing someone off as lazy, you look for the obstacles that might be invisible to you: sleep debt, caregiving responsibilities, or unclear expectations. Curiosity acts like a lens that brings texture into focus where once there was only blur. Practically, staying curious reshapes how you listen and how you speak. It moves you from waiting to talk to leaning into someone's words, noticing what they emphasize and what they evade. Ask open-ended questions that invite story instead of yes/no answers. How did that happen? What was that like for you? Where does this come from? Follow a person's thread with small, sincere follow-ups. Tell me more about that, or, when did you first notice this? Rather than immediately offering solutions or comparisons. Use reflective listening, paraphrase what you heard and check it. It sounds like you felt X when Y happened, is that right? Which both validates and clarifies. Curiosity also asks for permission when appropriate. Would you like to talk about that now, or would you prefer I just listen? A small habit that respects autonomy while keeping the door open. Curiosity corrects for many of the mind's lazy shortcuts. Our brains are prodigiously good at pattern matching, which helps us process a chaotic world, but it also produces misjudgments, stereotypes, confirmation bias, and the fundamental attribution error, blaming character rather than circumstance. A curious stance interrupts those shortcuts. When you notice the quick story in your head, they're irresponsible, pause and translate it into a question: what happened that day? Or, what's the context I'm missing? This practice doesn't require you to erase caution or prudence, it simply asks you to gather facts before you commit to a verdict. Over time, that discipline yields more accurate assessments and fairer responses. Curiosity is also a powerful relational technology. People who are genuinely curious make others feel seen and understood, and that builds trust faster than any clever argument. When you bring interest, your focused attention, your memory of small details, your willingness to follow up weeks later, you signal that someone matters beyond the transactional. That kind of attention opens doors: honest confessions, richer collaboration, heartfelt apologies, and unexpected generosity. In teams, curiosity dissolves blame and surfaces systemic issues. Leaders who ask, "Why do you think this happened?" more often than, "Who is to blame?" foster cultures where problems are solved rather than scapegoats created. The benefits extend into learning, creativity, and conflict resolution. Curiosity about people uncovers motivations and constraints that reveal opportunities for better design, smarter strategy, or kinder interactions. It produces hypotheses you can test rather than fixed beliefs you defend. In conflicts, curiosity defangs moral outrage because it turns an adversary into a source of information. What do they need? What fear is driving them? And it enables negotiation. Curiosity invites experimentation. Try asking a question instead of making a counterattack and observe how that changes the dialogue. Frequently, The other person shifts from defensive to cooperative when they feel understood. Cultivating curiosity requires habits and guardrails. Begin by training specific conversational muscles: 3 open questions before you give advice, 1 minute of silence after someone stops speaking so you don't fill the gap, and 1 concrete follow-up, a text, an article, a check-in, within a week that references something they shared. Keep a people notebook where you record surprising facts, patterns, and what you learned about others. This practice strengthens attention and helps you remember details that make future interactions feel sincere rather than performative. Read broadly: biographies, interviews, work from fields unlike yours, to expand the vocabulary and mental models you can bring to understanding others. Put a default check in your mind: whenever a strong judgment arises, ask yourself, "What don't I know?" and then actually seek the missing information. But curiosity must be tempered with respect and ethical boundaries. There's a fine line between genuine interest and invasive prying. Notice consent, verbal and nonverbal, and honor it. If someone shuts down, shortens answers, or changes the subject, don't press. Ask for permission before asking intimate questions: "May I ask what led to that decision?" Be culturally sensitive: what curiosity looks like in one context can feel rude in another. Also guard against using curiosity as a tool of manipulation. Curiosity that's merely an instrument to extract information for advantage loses its moral footing and erodes trust. Emotional labor and privacy impose another constraint. Curiosity can be exhausting for people who are often asked to explain themselves: parents, caregivers, minorities, or trauma survivors. Practice reciprocal vulnerability: share to invite sharing, and balance your questions with offers of support. If someone has to revisit painful material repeatedly, be mindful of their bandwidth and consider other ways to show care: acts of service, small gestures, or simply being reliably present. Curiosity that is kind recognizes when to listen and when to bear witness without interrogation. Curiosity about people is also curiosity about yourself, because it inevitably becomes a mirror. When you ask why someone acts a certain way and learn the complexity behind it, you often find your own assumptions reflected back. Cultivate humility: allow people's stories to complicate your neat categories. Notice which kinds of people trigger quick judgments in you and investigate those triggers. Often they reveal unresolved fears or unexamined resentments. In that way, staying curious is a path to psychological growth as much as social wisdom. Finally, make curiosity a long-term practice rather than a one-off tactic. Treat it like a muscle that needs regular use. Schedule conversations with people different from you. Set a monthly goal to learn the backstory of one colleague or neighbor. Join groups where you're the beginner and the questions are expected. Celebrate small discoveries: a detail that changes an opinion, a story that deepens an acquaintance into friendship, a misunderstanding averted because you asked one more question. Over time, curiosity compounds. You gain more accurate judgments, deeper relationships, and a richer, more forgiving map of human behavior. Staying curious about people doesn't mean you must trust everyone indiscriminately. It means you owe them inquiry before indictment, context before contempt, and the generosity of attention before the convenience of a conclusion. Stay humble. To stay humble is to cultivate a mindset and a way of being that balances confidence with self-awareness, achievement with perspective, and competence with curiosity. Humility is not self-denigration or an insistence on invisibility. It is a recognition of your strengths without letting them inflate your sense of self, and an acknowledgement of your limitations without letting them diminish your capacity to act. It is the understanding that no accomplishment exists in isolation, that success is always interwoven with the efforts of others, with circumstances beyond your control, and with the passage of time that shapes opportunity. Humility is a lens through which you see yourself as a participant in a larger world rather than its sole protagonist, and through which you measure achievement not as a pedestal but as a milestone along a continuum of learning. Staying humble begins with self-knowledge. It requires the ability to see yourself clearly, your abilities, your flaws, your biases, and your blind spots. This clarity does not come from false modesty or the avoidance of acknowledgement, but from deliberate reflection and honest feedback. When you understand your true capacities, you avoid two traps: arrogance, which exaggerates your role and diminishes others, and insecurity, which undervalues your potential and stifles initiative. Humility provides equilibrium. It allows you to act boldly when appropriate while keeping your feet grounded, aware that today's victories do not guarantee tomorrow's, and that all outcomes are shaped by forces beyond your personal control. Humility also manifests in your relationship with knowledge and learning. A humble person recognizes that every situation contains something to learn, every interaction is an opportunity for insight, and every individual you meet carries perspectives that can expand your understanding. This mindset transforms feedback, criticism, and failure into tools rather than threats. Instead of defensively guarding your ego when challenged, you assess the content, integrate the useful insights, and discard what is irrelevant without rancor. Humility makes continuous improvement possible because it frames growth as a lifelong project, not a one-time achievement, and it prevents stagnation by acknowledging that mastery is always incomplete. Another dimension of humility is interpersonal. Humility fosters respect and empathy. When you recognize that others have knowledge, experience, and contributions that matter, you listen more carefully, defer credit where it is due, and avoid dominating conversations or claiming undue authority. It encourages generosity of spirit, acknowledging the roles of teammates, mentors, family, and circumstance in your successes rather than positioning yourself as the lone architect of outcomes. Social humility is not weakness, it strengthens influence because people gravitate toward those who validate and recognize them rather than those who seek to overshadow. It diffuses tension, builds trust, and fosters collaboration, which often leads to more sustainable and meaningful accomplishments. Humility also serves as a guardrail against hubris, the subtle overestimation of control, knowledge, or entitlement that often precedes failure. History is replete with examples of individuals or institutions undone not by external forces, but by the arrogance born from repeated success. Humility tempers pride with awareness, caution with confidence, and ambition with perspective. It allows you to celebrate achievements without letting them distort your values, to set high goals without trampling the well-being of others, and to take responsibility for mistakes without seeking scapegoats. This careful balancing act between self-assurance and self-awareness is what sustains growth over time. Practically, humility can be cultivated through deliberate reflection and behavioral habits. Journaling on lessons learned from both successes and failures sharpens perspective. Seeking feedback, especially from those whose opinions differ from your own, expands understanding and exposes blind spots. Practicing gratitude, regularly acknowledging the support, effort, and circumstances that contribute to your life, anchors achievement in context rather than ego. Listening attentively in conversations, asking questions with genuine curiosity, and deferring immediate judgment are simple yet profound ways to reinforce humility in daily interactions. Even small acts, such as acknowledging your mistakes publicly or giving credit freely, compound into a reputation for groundedness that reinforces your internal mindset. Staying humble also involves balancing ambition with realism. Ambition drives action and fosters growth, but humility tempers it, preventing reckless overreach. The humble person can pursue lofty goals while remaining aware of risk, uncertainty, and the contributions of others. They navigate competition without personalizing it as a measure of worth, and they celebrate victories without arrogance because they understand impermanence and context. This combination produces not only ethical behavior but sustained success, because it encourages measured risk-taking, informed decision-making, and adaptive learning. Finally, humility shapes the internal narrative of life itself. It frames your story not as a series of conquests that define you, but as a sequence of experiences, contributions, and lessons that collectively form your journey. It allows you to encounter the world with curiosity instead of entitlement, to receive help without shame, to offer help without expectation, and to accept the unpredictable nature of life without resentment. It softens the sting of setbacks and tempers the euphoria of triumphs, creating a stable internal equilibrium that supports resilience, thoughtful action, and ethical engagement. In essence, staying humble is the practice of seeing yourself as both capable and finite, knowledgeable and continually learning, responsible yet interdependent. It is the quiet skill of balancing confidence with self-awareness, authority with empathy, and achievement with perspective. It ensures that your growth is sustainable, your relationships are genuine, and your actions are measured not by the desire to dominate, but by the commitment to contribute meaningfully and authentically in a world where every success is, in truth, a shared story. Humility is, therefore, not a limitation, it is the architecture of character that allows wisdom, influence, and integrity to endure. Treat people with kindness. Treating people with kindness is one of those principles that sound simple enough to be taken for granted, yet its depth becomes clear only when you realize how rare it is in practice. Kindness is not just about being polite or avoiding cruelty. It is an active choice to acknowledge the humanity of others, even when circumstances make it inconvenient or when nothing tangible can be gained in return. Every person you meet carries a private weight, fears they don't voice, disappointments they hide, dreams they protect from ridicule. Most of these burdens are invisible, but they shape behavior in ways that can easily be misread. A sharp tone, an impatient gesture, a distracted stare might have nothing to do with you and everything to do with the battles someone is fighting in silence. When you choose kindness, you choose not to add to that weight. You decide to be a shelter rather than another storm. Kindness begins in the smallest gestures, a word of encouragement, a patient pause in a hurried moment, a willingness to listen when someone needs to be heard. These moments may seem insignificant to you, but to someone else they can be lifelines. A simple thank you to the cashier, a smile at a stranger, an acknowledgement of effort, these cost nothing yet can shift the tone of an entire day. That is the quiet power of kindness, its effect multiplies as it moves from person to person. A single generous act can ripple outward, altering the behavior of people you will never meet. In a world where impatience and indifference often feel like the default, kindness becomes an act of quiet rebellion. It is easy to be kind when others are kind to you. The real test is in moments of tension, when someone is rude, dismissive, or unjust. In those moments, the impulse to mirror hostility is strong because retaliation feels like restoration of balance. But responding with unkindness only perpetuates the cycle of bitterness. Choosing kindness in such situations is not weakness, it is strength under control. It means refusing to let someone else's behavior dictate your character. It is the conscious decision to lead the interaction rather than be dragged down by it. This does not mean allowing people to mistreat you. Boundaries and kindness can coexist. You can assert yourself firmly without resorting to cruelty. In fact, kindness often sharpens rather than softens authority because it signals confidence and composure rather than insecurity. One of the overlooked truths about kindness is that it benefits the giver as much as the receiver. Acts of kindness release chemicals in the brain associated with happiness and calm. They reduce stress and create a sense of connection, even with strangers. They affirm your identity as someone capable of goodness, which strengthens your own resilience in difficult times. A life practiced in kindness tends to attract trust, cooperation, and goodwill, which in turn opens doors, personally and professionally, that force cannot. In this sense, kindness is not only moral but practical. It is a social currency that never devalues and often compounds. Kindness also matters because influence spreads through example. Children learn how to treat others by watching the adults around them. Teams learn how to handle conflict by observing their leaders. Communities take cues from the tone of their most visible voices. When you act with kindness, you set a standard, even if no one acknowledges it aloud. Someone notices, the intern, the colleague, the stranger on the train, and that observation might shape how they behave in their next interaction. This is how cultures shift, not through sweeping declarations, but through thousands of small, consistent acts that make decency seem normal. It is important to understand that kindness is not the same as compliance or people-pleasing. It does not mean sacrificing your values to avoid discomfort or saying yes when you need to say no. Real kindness has integrity. It respects both your dignity and the dignity of others. Sometimes the kindest act is honesty delivered with care, or accountability tempered with empathy. Sometimes it is refusing to enable harmful behavior while still affirming the worth of the person involved. Kindness, in its truest form, is not softness, it is strength with gentleness, power exercised with grace. In the end, treating people with kindness is about recognizing the shared fragility that binds us all. Life is hard for everyone in different ways. No one escapes loss, fear, or failure. Against that backdrop, cruelty becomes redundant. What people need, what they will remember long after words fade, is how you made them feel in their most human moments. Did you add to their pain or ease it? Did you make them feel small or seen? These are the questions that outlive transactions and titles. To treat people with kindness is to choose the legacy of being a builder rather than a breaker, a giver rather than a taker. It is to believe that the smallest light in the darkest room still matters, and to be willing to be that light, again and again, even when the world gives you every reason not to.